Before you fall asleep tonight, imagine receiving a letter from someone who died 10 years ago. A letter written in their handwriting. A letter that knows a secret you've never told another soul. And at the very bottom, a message asking you to meet them one final time at a lighthouse that officially no longer exists. The rain arrived just after sunset. Not the violent kind, not the dramatic kind, just a steady rhythm against the windows. The sort of rain that makes the world feel smaller, quieter, safer somehow. 38-year-old Ethan Harper sat alone in his small house overlooking the rocky coastline of Maine. A mug of coffee cooled beside him. An unfinished book rested in his lap. And outside, the Atlantic Ocean disappeared beneath drifting curtains of mist. It had been 10 years. 10 years since his father died. 10 years since the funeral. 10 years since the unanswered questions. Some losses become lighter with time. Others simply become familiar. The clock on the wall ticked softly. The rain continued. And then someone knocked. 3 slow knocks. Ethan frowned. Nobody visited this late, especially not during storms. He crossed the room, opened the front door, and found no one there. Only darkness, rain, wind, and a single envelope resting on the porch. His name was written across the front, Ethan Harper. Nothing unusual about that, at least not at first. But when he picked it up, his heart stopped, because he recognized the handwriting immediately. The same looping letters, the same careful strokes, the same style he'd seen hundreds of times as a child. His father's handwriting. A cold sensation traveled down his spine. The rain seemed quieter suddenly. The world seemed farther away. Slowly, Ethan stepped back inside, closed the door, and stared at the envelope. People often say handwriting can never truly be forgotten, especially the handwriting of someone you loved, especially the handwriting of someone you lost. His hands trembled. He turned the envelope over. No return address, no stamp, no postal markings, nothing. Just one small symbol pressed into the paper. A lighthouse, barely visible, almost hidden. The room felt colder. The fire crackled softly nearby, yet Ethan couldn't move. Have you ever seen something that made no sense, yet somehow felt completely real? He carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a single page. One sentence, only one. Ethan, if you still carry the promise you broke, meet me at Blackwater Lighthouse, midnight, October 17th. Come alone. Dad. The room became silent, except for the rain, except for his heartbeat, except for the memory. The promise you broke. There was only one promise, one he had never spoken about, one he had buried years ago, one he had never told anyone. A promise made during his father's final week, a promise he never kept. Ethan lowered the letter, and for the first time in 10 years, he felt afraid. Not because of ghosts, not because of death, but because whoever wrote that letter knew the one secret he had spent a decade trying to forget. Outside, lightning flashed over the ocean, and far beyond the cliffs, deep within the fog, a lighthouse beam appeared. Just once, a single sweep of white light. The problem was, Blackwater Lighthouse had been destroyed 40 years earlier, and yet, someone or something had just turned on its light. The lighthouse beam vanished almost as quickly as it appeared. One sweep of white light, then darkness. Nothing but rain, nothing but fog, nothing but the endless Atlantic stretching beyond the cliffs. Ethan stood motionless beside the window. The letter remained in his hand. His father's handwriting stared back at him. Neat, careful, unmistakable. For a long time, he simply listened to the rain. Part of him wanted an explanation. Another part wanted to burn the letter and forget it ever existed. Because if there was one thing Ethan Harper had learned during the past 10 years, it was that some memories were safer when left alone. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed softly. 9 o'clock. 3 hours until midnight. 3 hours until the meeting. If there really was a meeting. If Blackwater Lighthouse truly existed. If any of this was real. He laughed quietly. The sound felt strange, nervous, uncertain. The kind of laugh people make when reality suddenly becomes difficult to trust. Carefully, he placed the letter on the kitchen table, then walked upstairs. There was something he needed to see. Something he hadn't touched in years. The far end of the hallway sat a small storage room. The door creaked as it opened. Dust floated through the dim light. Boxes lined the walls. Old photographs, forgotten belongings, pieces of a life stored away and mostly ignored. Ethan knelt beside a wooden trunk, the same trunk his father had owned. For years, he had avoided opening it. Not because of grief, because of guilt. Sometimes those two emotions become difficult to separate. The latch clicked open. Inside lay old journals, maps, nautical charts, photographs, and dozens of letters. Letters written by his father over many decades. Slowly, Ethan removed one, then another, then another. He spread them across the floor, comparing them, studying them, searching. His pulse quickened. The handwriting matched, perfectly. Every curve, every loop, every tiny detail. Impossible, yet undeniably real. Outside, thunder rolled across the ocean, far away, soft enough to feel comforting, like distant footsteps moving through the night. Ethan picked up one particular letter, a birthday card from 20 years ago. Inside was a familiar message. Never stop looking beyond the horizon. Love, Dad. The handwriting was identical, exactly identical. A chill traveled through him, because handwriting could be copied, but perfection was different. Perfection felt impossible. The rain tapped gently against the window, and suddenly another memory surfaced, a forgotten one, a memory connected to Blackwater Lighthouse. Ethan was 12 years old. The sky had been clear that day, bright blue, warm. His father had taken him fishing. They'd spent hours sailing along the coast, talking about nothing important, talking about everything important, the kind of conversations that only happen between a parent and child. At one point, his father pointed toward the horizon, toward a distant shape rising from the fog. A lighthouse, Blackwater Lighthouse. Even then, it had already been abandoned. The structure stood alone on a rocky island several miles offshore, weathered by storms, forgotten by time, yet somehow beautiful. Ethan remembered asking why nobody lived there anymore. His father had smiled, a strange smile, not sad, not happy, thoughtful. The lighthouse has a story. What kind of story? The kind people stop believing. Young Ethan had laughed. Is it a ghost story? His father looked toward the distant tower. For a moment, he seemed older somehow, more serious. Then he said something Ethan had never forgotten. Some places aren't haunted by ghosts. Some places are haunted by memories. The memory faded, leaving Ethan staring into the darkness of the storage room. Haunted by memories. The phrase echoed softly through his mind. And for reasons he couldn't explain, it felt important, very important. By 10 o'clock, the storm had weakened. The rain became softer, the wind quieter. The entire coastline seemed wrapped in silence. Ethan returned downstairs. The letter waited on the table, patient, mysterious, impossible. His eyes drifted toward the small lighthouse symbol pressed into the paper. Something about it bothered him. Not the symbol itself, its design. He leaned closer, examining the tiny image. The lighthouse appeared old, Victorian, detailed. At its base rested a strange emblem, a circle surrounding 3 stars. The sight felt familiar, yet he couldn't remember why. Then suddenly, he froze. The symbol wasn't on the letter alone. He had seen it upstairs, inside the trunk, on something else, something important. Ethan hurried back to the storage room. The trunk remained open, letters scattered around it. He searched carefully. Maps, journals, photographs, nothing. Then finally, a small leather notebook, hidden beneath the stack of papers. His father's journal. The emblem appeared on the cover. A circle, 3 stars, exactly the same. Ethan opened the journal. Most pages contained ordinary entries, weather reports, fishing notes, personal reflections. Then halfway through the book, he discovered something unusual. Several pages had been removed, torn out completely. Only jagged edges remained, as though someone wanted certain entries erased. The sight immediately raised questions. Who removed them, and why? He turned more pages. The handwriting grew increasingly hurried, increasingly anxious. Then one entry caught his attention. October 17th, the same date written on the letter, the same date as tonight. His heartbeat quickened. The entry was short, very short, only a few lines, yet every word seemed important. If you're reading this someday, it means the light returned. And if the light returned, then the crossing has opened again. Ethan stared. The crossing? What crossing? The journal offered no explanation, only another sentence, one final sentence. The words appeared underlined, written darker than everything else. As though his father desperately wanted them remembered. Some promises survive death. Silence filled the room. Outside, the ocean whispered against the cliffs. The house creaked softly, and Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in years. Curiosity. Dangerous curiosity. The kind that refuses to let go. The kind that keeps people awake long after midnight. Have you ever found a mystery you knew you should ignore, yet couldn't stop thinking about? Ethan certainly had, and every answer seemed to create two new questions. He checked the clock. 10:47 p.m. Just over an hour remaining. The meeting drew closer. The lighthouse, the letter, the journal, the missing pages, the crossing. Nothing made sense, yet somehow everything felt connected. Then something unexpected happened. A photograph slipped from between the journal pages, drifting onto the floor. Ethan picked it up. At first glance, it looked ordinary. An old black and white family photograph. His father, his mother, himself, standing near the harbor, smiling. But then he noticed something impossible. Someone else stood in the background, half hidden by fog, watching. A woman Ethan had never seen before. And written across the back of the photograph, in his father's handwriting, were 5 chilling words. She arrived from the lighthouse. Outside, somewhere beyond the cliffs, a foghorn echoed through the darkness. Long, low, lonely. And Blackwater Lighthouse, the lighthouse that should not exist, lit up once again. The foghorn echoed across the coastline. Long, low, ancient. The sound drifted through the night like a memory searching for someone who had forgotten it. Ethan stood frozen beside the window. The photograph remained in his hand. The mysterious woman stared back at him from the faded image, half hidden in fog, almost impossible to notice. Yet now that he had seen her, he couldn't look away. Who was she? And why had his father written, "She arrived from the lighthouse"? Outside, another flash of light swept across the ocean. White, bright, gone. The beam emerged from somewhere deep within the fog, from the direction of Blackwater Island, from the place where Blackwater Lighthouse had supposedly stood before a storm destroyed it 40 years ago. Ethan checked the clock. 11:03 p.m. Less than an hour remained. The sensible choice would have been obvious. Stay home, lock the door, ignore the letter, pretend none of this had happened. But the sensible choice had become increasingly difficult, because every clue pointed towards something bigger, something hidden, something his father had spent years trying to protect, or perhaps trying to understand. The rain finally stopped. Silence settled over the house, soft, heavy, the kind of silence that makes every sound feel important. Ethan looked at the photograph once more, then carefully slipped it into his jacket pocket. If he was going to Blackwater Lighthouse, he wanted every clue he could find. 20 minutes later, his truck rolled along the narrow coastal road. Fog drifted across the pavement. The ocean remained hidden somewhere beyond the darkness. Only the occasional sound of crashing waves revealed its presence. The farther Ethan dove, the more isolated the world became. Streetlights disappeared, houses became rare, even the radio signal faded into static. Soon there was nothing but darkness, fog, and the steady glow of his headlights. The road wound northward, toward Blackwater Point, toward the abandoned harbor nearest to the lighthouse island, toward answers, or perhaps toward something far stranger. The dashboard clock read 11:21 p.m. Ethan tightened his grip on the steering wheel. His father had died exactly 10 years earlier, October 17th. The same date, the same night. The coincidence felt impossible, and yet coincidence no longer seemed like a useful explanation. A sharp turn appeared ahead. As he rounded it, something unexpected caught his eye. A mailbox. Old, weathered, standing alone beside the road. Most people would have driven past without noticing, but Ethan recognized it immediately, because the mailbox belonged to a house that no longer existed. Years ago, a fire had destroyed the property completely. Nothing remained. Nothing except the mailbox. And hanging from it was something strange. A small brass key, swinging gently in the wind. Ethan slowed the truck, then stopped. The engine idled quietly. Fog rolled across the empty road. The key continued swaying, back and forth, almost inviting him closer. A strange feeling settled over him, the feeling that this wasn't random.
The feeling that someone had placed the key there intentionally, waiting for him. After a moment, he stepped out of the truck.
Cold air greeted him immediately. The scent of salt water filled the darkness. He approached the mailbox cautiously. The brass key appeared old, very old. Attached to it was a small paper tag, 5 handwritten words. Some doors remember visitors. Ethan's pulse quickened. The handwriting matched the letter, matched the journal, matched his father's. Slowly he removed the key. The metal felt cold in his palm. For a moment he considered throwing it away. Instead, he slipped it into his pocket. Something told him he would need it later. By 11:37 p.m., he reached Blackwater Point. The harbor appeared almost deserted. Only a handful of weathered docks stretched into the dark water. Most boats were gone. The few remaining vessels rocked gently against their moorings. Fog covered everything. The sea, the horizon, the distant island. Nothing remained visible beyond a few hundred feet. The place felt forgotten, abandoned, yet strangely peaceful. A small harbor office stood near the docks. Its lights were still on, warm yellow light glowing through old windows. Ethan hesitated, then walked toward it. Inside sat an elderly man reading a newspaper. White beard, heavy coat, weathered face. The sort of person who looked as though he belonged to the ocean itself. The man glanced up. His expression changed instantly. Not surprise, recognition, as though he had expected Ethan. "You're late." The words landed heavily. Ethan frowned. "What?" The old man folded his newspaper. "Your father always arrived early." Silence filled the room. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Ethan carefully asked, "You knew my father?" The old man smiled faintly. "Knew him?" He looked toward the fog-covered harbor. "We spent 20 years trying to solve the same mystery." The answer only deepened the mystery. Ethan stepped closer. "What mystery?" The old man studied him quietly, then asked a question of his own. "Did you receive the letter?" Ethan's stomach tightened. "How do you know about the letter?" The old man ignored the question. Instead, he reached beneath the counter and produced a worn leather notebook. Its cover carried the same symbol: the circle, the 3 stars, the lighthouse. Ethan stared. Another notebook, another connection, another clue. The old man placed it gently on the counter. "Your father left this here." Ethan's pulse hammered. "When?" The answer came softly. 3 days after his funeral. The room seemed to tilt. For a moment, Ethan wondered if he had misheard. 3 days after his funeral? Impossible. Completely impossible. Yet the old man appeared sincere, certain, almost saddened by the memory. Ethan opened the notebook. Inside rested a folded page. Only one sentence had been written: "When the light returns, trust the keeper." The signature below was unmistakable. "Dad." Ethan looked up sharply. "Who is the keeper?" The old man's expression darkened. Slowly he turned toward the harbor window, toward the fog, toward the distant darkness beyond. Then he whispered, "That's what we've been trying to find out." The wind rattled the glass. Outside, the fog shifted. For a brief moment, the lighthouse became visible, far offshore, standing tall above the sea, its beacon turning slowly through the darkness. Bright? Real? Impossible. Ethan's breath caught, because he wasn't imagining it anymore. The lighthouse was there, clearly there, as real as the ocean itself. The old man rose from his chair. His face had grown pale, almost frightened. "What is it?" Ethan asked. The old man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pointed toward the lighthouse, toward the glowing beacon sweeping through the fog. And when he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "That's not the lighthouse." Ethan stared. "What do you mean?" The old man swallowed hard, then delivered the words that would haunt Ethan for the rest of the night. "The real Blackwater lighthouse disappeared 40 years ago." Another silence. Long, heavy, uncomfortable. The old man's eyes never left the distant tower. "Whatever you're seeing out there tonight." The beacon flashed once more through the fog, bright enough to illuminate the harbor, bright enough to reveal something standing at the end of the dock. A woman, wearing a long dark coat, motionless, watching them. The same woman from the photograph. The same face. The same fog. The same impossible presence. And before Ethan could move, she slowly raised one hand and pointed toward the lighthouse. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The harbor seemed to hold its breath. The woman stood at the very end of the dock,
motionless, silent, watching. Fog drifted around her feet.
Like pale waves. The distant lighthouse beams swept across the water, and for a brief second, its white glow illuminated her face. Ethan's heart nearly stopped, because she was unmistakably the same woman from the photograph. The same features, the same expression, the same haunting familiarity. It was impossible. The photograph had to be at least 20 years old, yet she hadn't aged a day. The old harbor keeper slowly removed his glasses. His hands trembled. Not much, just enough. And somehow that frightened Ethan more than anything else. "What is it?" Ethan asked quietly. The old man didn't answer immediately. His eyes remained fixed on the woman. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded distant, like someone remembering a nightmare. "She's back." The words settled heavily between them. Back. Not here. Back. As though she had appeared before. As though others had seen her. As though this wasn't the first time. The woman continued staring toward the harbor office, toward Ethan. The lighthouse beam crossed the sea again. And suddenly, she was gone. Simply gone. No footsteps, no movement. One moment she stood there. The next, the dock was empty. Nothing remained except fog. The old man muttered something under his breath. A prayer, perhaps, or a memory. Ethan rushed outside. Cold air struck him immediately. The harbor stretched before him, silent, empty. The end of the dock lay only 100 feet away. He jogged toward it. His shoes echoed softly against wet wood. The fog thickened. The sea whispered beneath the boards. When he reached the spot where the woman had stood, there was no one there. Only a small object resting on the dock. A silver pocket watch. Old, beautifully crafted. The metal surface reflected the lighthouse beam. Ethan knelt, carefully picked it up. The moment his fingers touched the watch, a strange sensation passed through him. Not pain, not fear. Something else. A memory. A flash, brief but vivid. He saw a young woman standing beside the lighthouse, laughing, smiling, looking towards someone beyond the edge of the vision. The image lasted only a second, then vanished, leaving Ethan kneeling alone in the fog. His pulse raced. The watch felt warm now, almost alive. Inside the cover, a small engraving had been etched into the silver. 4 simple words. "Until the light returns." The same phrase again. The light, the return, the crossing. Every clue seemed connected, yet the picture remained incomplete, like pieces of a puzzle scattered across decades. Behind him, footsteps approached. The harbor keeper emerged from the fog. His face looked troubled, more troubled than before. He stared at the pocket watch, then sighed. "You shouldn't have touched that." Ethan stood. "What is this?" The old man hesitated. For a long moment he appeared to be choosing between silence and honesty. Finally, honesty won. That watch belonged to Eleanor. The name felt familiar, not because Ethan knew it, because he had heard it somewhere before, recently. Then it clicked. The journal. One of the few remaining pages. A name written in the margin. Eleanor. Barely noticeable, almost hidden. At the time it had seemed unimportant. Now it suddenly felt very important. Who was she? Ethan asked. The old man looked toward the ocean, toward the lighthouse, toward the impossible beacon shining through the mist. Then he answered, "Nobody knows." Ethan blinked. "What?" The keeper nodded slowly. "That's the strange part." The wind stirred around them. The sea rolled gently below. "The records don't make sense," the old man continued. "We found photographs, letters, mentions in journals, references in newspaper articles." He paused. "But every official document says she never existed." The answer sent a chill through Ethan. People could be forgotten. History often overlooked ordinary lives. But erased? That was different. That was impossible, wasn't it? The keeper sighed. "Your father spent years investigating." The words immediately caught Ethan's attention. Investigating what? The lighthouse. The old man's eyes darkened. And the people connected to it. The lighthouse beam swept across the harbor again. Bright, silent, watching. Ethan looked toward the sea. The structure stood clearly visible now, far more visible than it should have been, especially through fog this dense. Its white tower rose above the rocks. Its beacon rotated slowly, patiently, like a giant eye searching the darkness. A thought suddenly occurred to him, one he should have asked earlier. If that lighthouse disappeared 40 years ago, the keeper nodded. Yes, then what happened to the people who worked there? Old man's expression changed, subtly, yet unmistakably. Fear. Real fear. Not superstition, not uncertainty. fear. "They vanished." The answer came softly. Ethan stared. "What do you mean, vanished?" The keeper swallowed. "The last keeper? The assistant keeper? The supply boat captain?" The old man's voice lowered further. "Every person connected to Blackwater Lighthouse disappeared within 3 months." Silence. Only waves. Only wind. Only the distant foghorns somewhere beyond the sea. Ethan struggled to process the information. "All of them?" The keeper nodded. Without explanation. The fog seemed colder suddenly. The night darker. The lighthouse farther away. And yet somehow closer. The old man looked directly at Ethan. "Your father believed they didn't disappear." A pause. "He believed they crossed." That word again. Crossed. The crossing. The journal entry. The letter. Everything kept returning to the same mystery. Crossing where? Crossing what? Before Ethan could ask, the pocket watch suddenly clicked. Both men froze. The watch had been broken. The hands unmoving. The mechanism silent. Yet now it ticked softly. Once. Twice. 3 times. The hands began moving. Slowly. Deliberately. Until they stopped. Exactly at midnight. At that precise moment. The lighthouse beam vanished. The foghorn fell silent. The wind disappeared. The entire harbor became unnaturally still. Then a voice echoed through the darkness. A woman's voice. Gentle. Distant. Impossible. "Ethan." His blood ran cold. The voice came from the ocean. From the direction of the lighthouse. "Ethan." The keeper stepped backward. His face pale. Almost terrified. Because he had heard it too. This wasn't imagination. This wasn't grief. This wasn't memory. The voice came again. Clearer now. Closer. "Come before the tide changes." Ethan stared toward the sea. Toward the lighthouse. Toward the impossible structure waiting beyond the fog. Then he noticed something. A boat. A small wooden boat drifting silently toward the dock. No engine. No sail. No visible passenger. It moved completely on its own, gliding across Blackwater, as though guided by an unseen hand. The boat reached the harbor, touched the dock softly, and stopped, waiting. Inside rested only a lantern, and beneath the lantern, another letter, written in his father's handwriting. The boat waited beside the dock, silent, motionless, as though it had traveled across the dark Atlantic for one purpose alone: to find Ethan Harper. The lantern resting inside cast a warm golden glow over the weathered wood. Its light danced softly across the black water. The fog drifted around it in slow, ghost-like swirls. And there, beneath the lantern, lay the letter. The second letter, written in the same unmistakable handwriting. His father's handwriting. For a long moment, Ethan simply stared. His heartbeat echoed in his ears. The harbor keeper remained several steps behind him. Neither man seemed eager to approach the boat, because both understood something now. This was no prank.
No coincidence. No elaborate misunderstanding. Something impossible was unfolding, and it seemed determined to lead Ethan somewhere. Somewhere beyond the fog, beyond the sea, beyond everything he thought he understood. The lantern flickered. The letter remained untouched, waiting, patiently, as though it already knew he would read it. Eventually, Ethan stepped forward. The dock creaked beneath his feet. The sea whispered below, and with careful hands, he picked up the envelope. His name appeared on the front once more. Nothing else. No address. No explanation. Only his name. Ethan. Simple. Personal. Familiar. The way his father always wrote it. He opened the envelope. Inside was a single folded page. The message was short. Painfully short. Almost as if every word had been chosen with extraordinary care. Ethan unfolded the paper and began reading. Ethan, you were never supposed to carry this burden alone. The promise was never about me. It was always about her. Come to the lighthouse. The truth has waited long enough. Dad. The words struck him harder than he expected. Her. Again. The mysterious woman. The woman from the photograph. The woman no official records remembered. The woman standing at the edge of the dock. The woman who somehow knew his name. The promise was never about me. It was always about her. A cold sensation settled deep inside his chest. Because suddenly, a memory surfaced. Not complete. Not clear. But enough. Enough to make him uneasy. Enough to make him afraid. 10 years earlier, the hospital room smelled faintly of antiseptic and rain. Outside, a storm had rolled across the coastline. Inside, machines hummed quietly. His father lay in bed, weak, pale, dying. Ethan had sat
beside him for hours, neither speaking much. Sometimes there simply aren't enough words. Not for moments like that. Not for goodbye. Late that evening, his father had reached beneath his pillow, removing a small envelope. One Ethan had never opened. One Ethan had never even looked at. Because shortly after receiving it, everything changed. His father's breathing worsened. Doctors rushed in. Family arrived. The envelope was forgotten. Lost amid grief. Lost amid chaos. Lost amid death. Yet before the nurses entered the room, his father had grabbed Ethan's hand and whispered something. Something Ethan had spent 10 years trying not to remember. Promise me you'll find her. Find her. Not save her. Not help her. Find her. At the time, Ethan assumed medication had confused him. People often say strange things near the end. Words tangled with memories. Dreams. Regrets. But now those words felt different. Now they felt important. Painfully important. The memory faded, leaving Ethan standing beside the boat, the letter trembling slightly in his hands. The promise. That was the promise. The one he broke. The one he ignored. The one he buried. Because grief had felt easier than mystery. The harbor keeper approached quietly. What did it say? Ethan handed him the note. The old man read it, then sighed heavily, almost sadly. As I feared. What does that mean? The keeper folded the letter. His weathered face looked older suddenly, more tired. As long as I've known your father, he paused. As long as I've studied Blackwater Lighthouse. The old man looked toward the sea, toward the impossible beacon glowing beyond the fog. There has always been one missing piece. Ethan felt his stomach tighten. The woman? The keeper nodded.
the woman. Silence settled between them. Soft waves rocked the mysterious boat. The lantern continued burning. The fog shifted lazily through the darkness. And somewhere far away, another foghorn sounded. Low, lonely, ancient. The sound felt less like a warning, more like an invitation.
Unnaturally, relentlessly, as though drawn by something beyond ordinary geography, the room felt colder. The harbor keeper swallowed hard. Then both men looked toward the final item, the sealed envelope. Ethan carefully opened it. Inside was another note. Only one sentence. Just one. Yet it changed everything. She is your sister. The world seemed to stop. The fire, the wind, the waves, everything. Ethan stared at the words, unable to breathe, unable to think, unable to understand. His sister. The woman from the lighthouse? The woman no records remembered? The woman who appeared unchanged after decades? Impossible. Completely impossible. And yet, deep down, something inside him whispered a terrifying possibility. What if it wasn't? The lighthouse beam suddenly flared brighter than ever before. The harbor windows shook, and from somewhere beyond the fog, a woman's voice called his name once more. Closer now, much closer. Ethan, it's time. The words echoed through the harbor office. It's time. The voice belonged to the woman, Eleanor, or at least the woman his father had called Eleanor. The woman who supposedly did not exist. The woman who might somehow be his sister. Outside, the fog shifted again. The lighthouse beam rotated across the dark water. Bright, steady, waiting. Ethan remained frozen beside the desk. The note trembled slightly in his hand. She is your sister. 5 simple words. 5 impossible words. The harbor keeper stared at the note, then at Ethan, then toward the lighthouse. His face carried the expression of a man watching a story finally reach the chapter he had feared most. For a long moment, neither spoke. The old clock on the wall ticked softly. The fire crackled. The sea whispered beyond the windows. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. My father never had another child. The keeper didn't answer. He would have told me. Still no answer. He would have said something. The old man slowly sat down. His weathered eyes looked tired. Not surprised. Not confused. Only tired. As though he had been carrying this mystery for many years, and now it had finally become someone else's burden. Your father tried. The words landed heavily. Ethan stared. What do you mean? The keeper sighed, then opened a drawer beneath the desk. From inside, he removed a worn leather folder. Its edges had yellowed with age. Its surface carried the same familiar symbol. The lighthouse. The circle. The 3 stars. Without speaking, he handed it over. Ethan opened it carefully. Inside rested newspaper clippings, old photographs, copies of handwritten letters, and a document dated nearly 30 years earlier, a birth certificate, partially damaged. Water stains covered much of the page. Several sections had become unreadable, yet one detail remained clear. Name, Eleanor Harper. Ethan's pulse quickened. Harper. His family name. His surname. His father's surname. The room suddenly felt smaller, the walls closer, the air heavier. Where did you get this? The keeper looked toward the sea. Your father. Of course. Everything always seemed to lead back to his father. The journals, the photographs, the clues, the promises, the lighthouse. Every road eventually circled back to him, as though Ethan had spent 10 years standing at the center of a mystery he never knew existed. Outside, the foghorn sounded again. Long, low, ancient. The sound rolled across the harbor like a distant memory, then faded into silence. Have you ever discovered something about your family that changed the way you saw your entire life? Not a small detail, not an interesting fact. Something deeper, something that quietly rearranged every memory, every assumption, every certainty. Ethan felt exactly that. Because if Eleanor truly existed, then someone had hidden her, deliberately, for decades. But why? The harbor keeper stood, slowly, carefully. His age showed in every movement. Then he walked toward the window overlooking the sea. The first time I saw the lighthouse, his voice softened. It was 1979. Ethan listened. Outside, waves rolled gently against the docks.
The fog drifted through darkness like pale smoke. The tower had already been abandoned. The keeper continued. Most people avoided it. Too many strange stories. Too many disappearances. He smiled faintly. The sort of stories people laugh about during daylight. His expression faded. But at night, he looked toward the distant beam. No one laughed. The lighthouse glowed steadily through the fog. Almost beautiful. Almost welcoming. Almost. The keeper folded his hands behind his back. I was 23. Curious. Stubborn. Certain every mystery had a logical explanation. He chuckled softly. The sound carried those
Humor. So I sailed out there. The room seemed to grow quieter. Even the fire appeared to listen. What happened? The old man hesitated, his eyes fixed on something far away, something long ago. Then he answered, I met the keeper. Ethan felt a chill. The lighthouse keeper? A nod. The last one. Silence followed, heavy silence, the kind that arrives before important truths. The records say he disappeared, Ethan said quietly. They're wrong. The answer came immediately. The keeper's eyes never left the lighthouse. I met him. The fire popped softly. A shower of sparks rose briefly, then vanished. Ethan waited. The old man continued. He was standing at the top of the tower, watching the ocean. He looked ordinary, friendly, calm. The keeper swallowed. Until he told me something. The lighthouse beam swept across the harbor. The white glow briefly illuminated the room, then moved on. What did he say? The old man answered without hesitation. He told me the lighthouse wasn't built to guide ships. Ethan frowned. Then what was it built for? The keeper looked directly at him, and for the first time that night, Ethan saw genuine fear in his eyes. To guide people. The answer sounded simple, yet somehow wrong. Incomplete. Strange. The keeper continued. Not across water. A pause. Across worlds. The room fell silent. Only the clock remained. Tick, tick, tick. Each second felt louder than the last. Across worlds. The phrase echoed through Ethan's thoughts. The crossing. The journals. The letters. The promises. Everything suddenly pointed toward the same impossible idea. And he desperately wanted a different explanation. A rational explanation. A normal explanation. But none appeared. The keeper moved toward a shelf. From it, he retrieved an old photograph, carefully framed, protected, treasured. He handed it over. Ethan examined it. The image showed the lighthouse decades earlier, bright, intact, majestic, and standing in front of it were 3 people. The keeper, a younger version of his father, and Eleanor. The same Eleanor, the same face, the same age, the same appearance, exactly the same. No older, no younger, as though time had simply refused to touch her. Ethan's throat tightened. The photograph couldn't be recent. The clothes, the cars in the background, the film quality, everything suggested it had been taken at least 30 years earlier. Yet Eleanor looked exactly as she had tonight. Exactly. No difference. Not one. The realization settled heavily, and for the first time, fear began replacing curiosity, because mysteries are one thing, impossible things are another. Suddenly, a sharp knock rattled the office door. Both men jumped. The knocks came again. 3 knocks. Slow, deliberate. The exact same pattern Ethan had heard earlier at his house. Knock, knock, knock. The keeper's face turned pale, very pale. Neither moved. The knocks came a 4th time. Then silence. Only silence. The fire crackled softly. The clock ticked. The sea whispered outside. Nothing more. Finally, Ethan approached the door. Carefully. Slowly. His hand wrapped around the handle. The metal felt cold. Unnaturally cold. He opened the door. The harbor stood empty. No visitor. No footprints. No movement. Nothing. Only fog. But resting on the wooden porch lay a small leather-bound diary. Dark blue. Weathered. Old. Ethan picked it up, immediately recognizing the handwriting on the cover. His father's. The title read, Blackwater Logbook, Volume 4. Ethan's breath caught. Volume 4, which meant there were others, several others, and this one had just appeared outside the door, at midnight. without explanation, without a messenger, without footprints, without anyone there. Slowly, he opened the diary. The pages fluttered gently, stopping near the middle, as though guided by an unseen hand. Only one paragraph appeared on the page, one paragraph written in hurried handwriting, one paragraph that made Ethan's blood run cold. If you are reading this, then Eleanor found you before I could warn you. Do not trust what the lighthouse shows. Not everything that crosses wants to return, and not everyone who returns is who they seem. The wind howled suddenly outside. The lighthouse beam flared brighter, and from somewhere beyond the harbor, a second lighthouse appeared in the fog. Not one lighthouse, two, standing side by side, where only one should exist. Two lighthouses, not one, two. Ethan stood motionless in the harbor office doorway. The cold night air drifted around him. The fog rolled across the docks, and beyond the black water, two towering beams of light pierced the darkness, side by side. Impossible. The original Blackwater.
Lighthouse should not have existed, yet now there were two. The first stood where it always appeared in the stories, upon the rocky island, silent, waiting. The second rose farther beyond it, deeper in the fog, older somehow. Its light appeared softer, paler, almost dreamlike, like a reflection from another world. The harbor keeper stepped beside Ethan. His face had lost all color. For several long seconds, he simply stared. Then he whispered words Ethan barely heard. "It hasn't happened in 30 years. Ethan turned. What hasn't happened? The keeper swallowed hard. The twin lights. A chill moved through the room. The twin lights. Another mystery. Another secret. Another piece of a puzzle that seemed determined to grow larger. The keeper closed the office door, locked it, then lowered the blinds over the windows, as though he suddenly feared what might be looking back. The fire crackled quietly. The harbor office felt smaller now, safer, yet somehow more dangerous, because answers were beginning to emerge, and answers often carry consequences. The old man looked at the diary lying on the desk. Blackwater Logbook, Volume 4. His expression tightened. "Your father never wanted you to read these." Ethan stared. "Then why leave them for me?" The keeper smiled sadly. "Because eventually he realized you would have to." Silence followed. Outside, the foghorn echoed again, long, lonely, ancient. The sound seemed farther away than before, almost as if it came from another place entirely. The keeper sat heavily in his chair, then motioned for Ethan to do the same. "We don't have much time." The words felt important, urgent. Ethan sat. The diary remained between them, waiting. The old man carefully opened it. Dust drifted from its pages. The paper looked ancient despite being only a few decades old. The ink remained surprisingly dark, as though the words refused to fade. The diary opened to an entry dated October 17th, 1996. Exactly 30 years ago. The same date, the same night, the same impossible pattern. The keeper began reading aloud. "Tonight the second lighthouse appeared again." His voice remained steady, but his hands did not. "Eleanor says the crossing is weakening. The boundaries are becoming thin. We heard voices from the sea. Not one voice, many, all calling different names." The keeper paused. The fire crackled. Outside, waves whispered against the docks. Then he continued. "The old keeper believes someone is trying to return. The question is not who. The question is why." Ethan felt his stomach tighten. Every answer seemed to create new questions. The keeper turned another page. Most entries contained observations, descriptions, warnings. Yet one section had been heavily underlined, repeated several times, almost obsessively. 3 words. "Do not follow them." Ethan frowned. "Them?" The keeper nodded slowly. "That's what worried your father." "Who are they?" The old man stared toward the darkened window. For a moment he appeared reluctant to answer. Then finally he spoke. "People who cross." The phrase again. Cross, crossing, across worlds. The same idea appeared everywhere, the same impossible explanation, and somehow it felt increasingly real. Have you ever noticed how some mysteries become more believable the longer you live with them? At first they seem absurd, then unusual, then possible, then inevitable. Ethan felt himself approaching that final stage, not because he wanted to believe, because every clue seemed determined to remove every alternative. The keeper reached into his coat pocket. From it he removed a small brass object, round, heavy,
weathered, a compass, almost identical to the one found in the box, except this compass behaved differently. Its needle spun continuously, never stopping, never settling, round and round, endlessly. Ethan watched in fascination. What causes that? The keeper's answer came quietly. Proximity. Proximity to what? The old man met his gaze. The crossing. The room felt colder. The spinning needle continued its endless motion. The keeper placed the compass beside the diary, then leaned forward. What I'm about to tell you, he hesitated. Sounds impossible. Ethan almost laughed. After tonight, impossible had become a crowded category. The keeper continued. 30 years ago, your father and I discovered a hidden chamber inside the lighthouse. The words immediately captured Ethan's attention. A hidden chamber. A secret room. The sort of thing every mystery seems to contain. Yet somehow this felt different. Important. What was inside? The old man exhaled slowly. A wall. Ethan blinked. A wall? The keeper nodded. Covered in names. Silence. Then thousands of names. The fire snapped sharply.
A burst of sparks rose into the air, then disappeared. The keeper's voice lowered. Some names belonged to people who vanished. Some belonged to sailors lost at sea. Some belonged to lighthouse keepers. He swallowed. And some belonged to people who were still alive. The room seemed to grow quieter. Ethan's pulse quickened. How is that possible? The old man smiled faintly, the smile of someone who had asked the same question for decades. We never figured that out. Outside, a gust of wind rattled the building. The foghorn sounded again, closer this time, much closer, as though something had moved nearer to shore. The keeper ignored it. Instead, he opened the diary farther, near the back, near the final pages. And there, tucked between two sheets, rested a folded photograph, old, faded, yellowed by time. Carefully, Ethan removed it. The image showed the hidden chamber, the wall, the names, thousands of them, written from floor to ceiling, layer upon layer, generation after generation, an impossible archive, a record of people connected to the lighthouse. At first, Ethan noticed nothing unusual. Then his eyes drifted toward the lower corner, and his breath stopped, because one of the names looked familiar, very familiar. Ethan Harper, his own name, written there, 30 years ago, long before he had ever visited Blackwater Lighthouse, long before tonight, long before any of this began. The photograph slipped slightly in his trembling hands. The keeper closed his eyes, almost sadly. You found it. Ethan looked up. What does this mean? The old man didn't answer immediately, because he already knew, and he knew Ethan wasn't ready to hear it. Finally, he spoke. Your father spent 10 years trying to erase that name. Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Terrifying. He couldn't. The keeper's voice barely rose above a whisper. No one ever could. The fire burned lower. The room darkened. Outside, the twin lights continued shining through the fog. Patient. Watching. Waiting. Then something happened. Something neither man expected. The diary suddenly fell open by itself, its pages turning rapidly, one after another. Faster. 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 Until they stopped on the very last page. Only one sentence appeared there, written in fresh ink. Fresh. As though it had been written moments ago. As though someone had just finished writing it. The message contained 6 words, and every word made Ethan's blood run cold. She's already inside the lighthouse. At that exact moment, a scream echoed across the harbor. A woman's scream. Sharp, terrified, desperate, and coming from the direction of the sea.
The scream echoed across the harbor. Sharp, terrified. Then silence. Not the ordinary silence of night. Not the peaceful silence that settles over sleeping towns. This silence felt wrong. Heavy. As though the entire coastline had stopped breathing. Ethan and the harbor keeper stared toward the dark windows. Neither moved. The scream had come from the sea, from somewhere between the docks and the distant lighthouse, or perhaps from somewhere beyond it. The distinction no longer felt clear. Outside, the twin lights continued to glow through the fog, one bright and solid, the other pale and dreamlike, like a memory refusing to disappear. The old man slowly rose from his chair. His expression had changed. Fear remained, but now another emotion had joined it. Recognition. He had heard that scream before. Ethan could see it in his eyes. You know who that was. The keeper hesitated, then nodded. The answer arrived quietly. Eleanor. A chill swept through the room. The name seemed to linger in the air. Eleanor. The woman from the photograph. The woman who might be his sister. The woman who appeared unchanged after decades. The woman who had called his name from the fog. And now, the woman screaming somewhere beyond the sea. Ethan moved toward the door. The keeper grabbed his arm immediately. No. What? Not yet. The old man's grip tightened. That's exactly what happened last time. Ethan frowned. What happened last time? The keeper looked toward the lighthouse. His face seemed older than ever. People followed the voices. Silence. Then, they never came back. The words settled heavily between them. Outside, the fog shifted. The sea whispered against the harbor. The distant beacon rotated patiently through darkness, as though it had all the time in the world. Have you ever heard something so familiar that it felt impossible to ignore? A voice, a song, a memory, something that reached into the deepest parts of your heart. The kind of thing that makes logic feel distant. The kind of thing that convinces people to walk toward mysteries they should avoid. That was exactly what frightened the harbor keeper, because he knew the lighthouse had always called people this way. Not through force, through longing. The old man released Ethan's arm, then returned to the desk. The diary remained open, its final message still visible. She's already inside the lighthouse. The fresh ink seemed darker now, as though the words had somehow deepened. Ethan stared at the page. Who wrote this? The keeper answered honestly. I don't know. Can ink appear by itself? No. The answer came immediately. No, it can't. Neither man spoke for several seconds, because they both understood the implication. Someone had written it. Somewhere. Somehow. And that possibility felt more unsettling than any supernatural explanation. The keeper carefully closed the diary, then opened a nearby cabinet. Inside rested several objects. Old photographs, maps, boxes filled with documents. The accumulated evidence of a lifetime spent investigating Blackwater Lighthouse. He removed a large rolled map, spread it across the desk. The paper crackled softly. Age had yellowed its edges. Saltwater stains marked its corners. Ethan leaned closer. The map showed the coastline, the harbor, the island, and the lighthouse. But something else appeared as well. Another structure, faintly drawn, located beyond the island, far beyond it, deep within open ocean. Ethan pointed toward it. What's that? The keeper followed his gaze. His expression darkened. We never found out. Not exactly a reassuring answer. The old man traced the faded outline with one finger. Every map before 1952 shows it. Every map after 1952 removes it. The room grew quieter. Another mystery, another disappearance. The pattern seemed endless. What is it supposed to be? The keeper swallowed, then answered. A second lighthouse. The words landed heavily. Outside, the pale twin light shimmered through fog. Distant, uncertain, waiting. Ethan looked from the map to the sea, then back again. A thought occurred to him, one he wasn't sure he wanted answered. What if it was never removed? The keeper met his eyes. For a moment, neither spoke. Then the old man nodded slowly. As I said, his voice dropped to a whisper. We never found out. The clock struck 1 in the morning. The sound echoed softly through the office. 1, 2, 3. Each chime seemed louder than normal, more significant. The night was advancing, and with every passing minute, the lighthouse felt increasingly alive, almost aware. The harbor keeper moved toward a
bookshelf. Among dozens of weathered journals sat a small wooden box. Unlike the others, this box carried no lighthouse symbol, no stars, no markings at all, just plain wood. Simple, ordinary. Yet the keeper handled it with unusual care. What is that? He hesitated, then answered. The messages. A pause. The messages from the other side. Ethan felt his stomach tighten. The phrase sounded absurd, yet tonight absurdity had become commonplace. The keeper opened the box. Inside rested dozens of folded notes, some yellowed with age, others surprisingly fresh. Carefully he selected one, then handed it over. The handwriting was unfamiliar, the paper brittle. The date at the top read October 17, 1987, nearly 40 years old. Ethan began reading. If this reaches anyone, please tell my wife I kept my promise. The fog opened at midnight. I saw the second light, and I crossed. The note ended abruptly. No signature, no explanation, nothing. Just those words. Ethan looked up. What is this? The keeper sighed. One of many. He handed over another, and another, and another. Each contains similar messages. Different names, different years, different people, yet the same themes. The fog, the crossing, the second lighthouse. Promises, goodbyes, returns. The collection felt impossible, as though generations of strangers had all stumbled into the same mystery. Then Ethan noticed something unusual. One note looked newer than the rest, much newer. The paper appeared almost untouched by time. Its date read October 18, 2016, 10 years ago, the night his father died. His pulse quickened. Slowly he unfolded it. The handwriting was unmistakable. His father's. The room seemed to tilt slightly. The keeper remained silent, allowing Ethan to read. The message was short, painfully short. My time is ending. If the light returns, Ethan must know the truth. Tell him Eleanor never left. Tell him she stayed behind to close the door. And tell him. The sentence ended there, incomplete. The remainder of the page had been torn away. Ethan stared. The missing words felt enormous, critical, as though they contained everything, and now they were gone. The frustration hit him immediately. Another clue, another fragment, another answer forever just out of reach. Then suddenly, a soft tapping sound interrupted his thoughts. Tap, tap, tap. The sound came from the window. Both men turned, slowly, carefully. The fog outside pressed against the glass, white, silent, featureless. Tap, tap, tap. Again, the keeper's face drained of color, because something stood outside, something hidden within the mist, watching, waiting. The tapping continued, steady, patient, almost polite. Ethan stepped closer, his heart pounded. The figure remained obscured, only a silhouette visible through the fog. Then the lighthouse beam swept across the harbor. For a single second, the face became visible. Eleanor, standing directly outside the window, her expression calm, sad, almost pleading. And in her hand she held something, a photograph. One Ethan recognized instantly, because it showed him, as a child, standing beside a woman he had never met. The same woman, Eleanor. For a moment, the entire world seemed to stop. The fire no longer crackled. The clock no longer ticked. Even the ocean appeared silent. Ethan stood frozen beside the harbor office window, unable to breathe, unable to think, unable to look away. Beyond the glass stood Eleanor, motionless, surrounded by drifting fog, holding a photograph that should not exist, because the child in the picture was unmistakably him, 5 years old, perhaps 6, standing on a beach beneath a bright summer sky, smiling, laughing, holding the hand of a woman he had never met. And yet, somehow, the woman looked familiar. Not familiar in the ordinary sense, not the way strangers sometimes resemble one another. No, this felt deeper, more unsettling. The kind of recognition that emerges from forgotten memories, the kind that hides quietly inside the heart long after the mind has forgotten. The lighthouse beam swept across the harbor. For an instant, Eleanor's face glowed silver white. Then darkness returned, and she was gone. Just like before. No footsteps, no movement, no sound. Only fog, only silence. Only the photograph she had pressed against the window. The photograph now resting on the wooden ledge outside. Ethan rushed to the door. The harbor keeper followed. Together they stepped into the cold night air. The fog curled around them. The sea whispered softly. And there, exactly where Eleanor had stood, lay the photograph, waiting. Ethan picked it up carefully. His hands trembled. The image felt real, old, weathered.
Authentic. Not a forgery, not a trick. The photograph had aged naturally. The edges had faded. Tiny cracks ran across its surface. This image had existed for years, perhaps decades. Yet Ethan had never seen it before. The realization unsettled him deeply, because childhood photographs don't simply appear out of nowhere. Someone had taken this picture. Someone had kept it. Someone had hidden it. And now, someone wanted him to find it. The harbor keeper studied the image quietly, then sighed. You remember her. It wasn't a question. Ethan looked up. No. The old man frowned. Not consciously. The answer came softly. But part of you does. The words lingered. Part of you remembers. Ethan looked back at the woman in the picture. The longer he stared, the stranger he felt. A sensation hovered just beyond reach. A memory. A fragment. A
feeling, like hearing a familiar melody from another room. Then suddenly, a flash, brief, powerful, unexpected. A memory surfaced. Sunlight, warmth, laughter, the smell of salt water. A woman sitting beside him on a beach blanket, reading from a storybook. Her voice gentle, comforting, safe. The memory lasted only seconds, yet the emotion remained. A feeling of belonging, a feeling of home. Then the vision disappeared, leaving Ethan standing once more in the cold harbor night. His heart raced. The memory felt real, too real, yet impossible, because he had never met Eleanor. Had he? The question frightened him, because for the first time, he wasn't certain of the answer. Have you ever remembered something you were absolutely sure you had forgotten forever? Not because someone reminded you, not because you searched for it, because it simply returned. Suddenly, unexpectedly, like a visitor arriving after many years. Memories can be strange that way. Sometimes they disappear, sometimes they hide, and sometimes they wait for the right moment. Back inside the harbor office, the keeper carefully examined the back of the photograph. Most old photographs carried notes, dates, names, locations, something. This one appeared blank, at first. Then he tilted it toward the firelight, and hidden beneath the surface, words emerged, written in faded ink, nearly invisible. Ethan leaned closer. The message read, Summer 1993. Below it, never forget. Then beneath that, Eleanor and Ethan. The room fell silent. The evidence was undeniable. Someone had identified the people in the picture. Someone had written their names. Someone had known them together. Eleanor and Ethan. Not strangers. Not distant acquaintances. Together. The realization left Ethan feeling strangely hollow, as though pieces of his life were shifting beneath his feet. If Eleanor truly knew him as a child, why didn't he remember? And why had everyone hidden her existence? The keeper slowly sat down. His face looked troubled, deeply troubled, as though he understood more than he wished to share. Finally, Ethan asked the question that had been building all night. What happened to her? The old man didn't answer immediately. Outside, the foghorn echoed across the sea. Long, low, lonely. The sound felt mournful somehow, like grief, like loss, like goodbye. The keeper folded his hands, then spoke. Eleanor disappeared when she was 16. The answer came quietly, carefully, like someone handling fragile glass. Ethan stared. Disappeared? A nod. Without explanation. The phrase sounded familiar, too familiar. Everyone connected to Blackwater seemed to disappear. The lighthouse keepers, the sailors, the visitors. The mystery spread through generations. The keeper continued. One evening she walked toward the lighthouse. His eyes drifted toward the sea. She never came home. Silence. The fire burned softly. The waves roll outside. The lighthouse being rotated through darkness. Patient. Watching. Waiting. But that doesn't make sense. Ethan frowned. The photographs, the letters, the sightings. The old man nodded. Exactly. His voice lowered. Because although she disappeared, he paused. People kept seeing her. A chill traveled through the room. The keeper continued. Years later, decades later, the same face, the same age, the same appearance, the impossible pattern again. No aging, no change, no explanation. Eleanor remained frozen in time, as though she belonged somewhere outside ordinary life, outside ordinary reality. The keeper stood, then crossed toward a filing cabinet. After searching briefly, he removed a newspaper clipping, yellowed with age. The headline read, Local Girl Missing. The photograph accompanying the article showed a 16-year-old Eleanor. Ethan's breath caught, because she looked exactly the same. Not similar, not close. Exactly the same. The woman from the dock, the woman at the window, the woman in the...
Calm. Fog. No difference. Not one. 30 years. No change. The realization settled heavily over the room. Then something unexpected happened. The lighthouse beams suddenly brightened. far brighter than before. The harbor windows glowed white, the office filled with strange light. Neither man spoke, neither moved. Outside, the fog began shifting rapidly, swirling, moving, opening. And for the first time that night, the ocean beyond the lighthouse became visible. What they saw stole every remaining word from Ethan's mouth. Because beyond Blackwater Lighthouse, beyond the island, beyond the fog, an entire shoreline had appeared. A shoreline that did not belong there. A distant coast, covered with lights, buildings, houses, roads, an entire town where no town should exist. The harbor keeper stared in disbelief, then whispered the words his father once wrote decades earlier: the village between worlds. And as the mysterious shoreline emerged from the mist, a church bell rang somewhere in the distance, calling across the water, calling toward the lighthouse, calling toward Ethan. The church bell echoed across the water, slow, gentle, melancholy. Its sound drifted through the fog like a forgotten memory searching for its way home. Ethan stood beside the harbor office window, unable to look away. Beyond Blackwater Lighthouse, beyond the impossible shoreline, an entire town shimmered beneath the silver glow of moonlight. It should not have been there. Every map insisted the ocean stretched endlessly beyond the island. Every chart, every satellite image, every record. And yet the town existed, visible, silent, waiting. Rows of small houses lined narrow streets. Warm lights glowed behind windows. A church steeple rose above the rooftops. And somewhere in that distant place, the bell continued to ring. The harbor keeper slowly removed his glasses. His hands trembled, more than before. Because unlike Ethan, he had spent decades searching for this place, studying it, hearing stories about it, collecting clues. Yet he had never actually seen it, not until now. The village, his voice barely rose above a whisper. I never thought I'd live long enough. The room fell silent again. Only the bell remained, soft, patient, calling from across impossible waters. Ethan stared toward the distant shoreline. Something about it felt familiar, not visually, emotionally, as though he had seen it once before, in a dream, or perhaps in a memory he no longer remembered. The sensation unsettled him, yet it also drew him closer, like the tide pulling gently against the shore. Then suddenly, a movement, near the waterfront, a figure, standing beneath the street lamp, far away, barely visible, yet unmistakably human. Ethan narrowed his eyes. The figure remained motionless, watching, waiting. Then another appeared, and another. Soon dozens of silhouettes stood along the distant shoreline, quietly observing the sea, quietly observing the lighthouse, quietly observing him. A strange sadness settled over Ethan, because despite the distance, the figures didn't feel threatening. They felt lonely. The feeling arrived unexpectedly, and with surprising intensity. Lonely, waiting, forgotten, as though the village itself carried the weight of countless unfinished stories. Have you ever visited a place for the first time and somehow felt homesick? Not because you recognized it, because something inside you did. Some places seem to exist beyond logic, beyond explanation, beyond memory, yet they still feel familiar. That was exactly how the village felt, and Ethan couldn't explain why. The harbor keeper turned away from the window, then opened another drawer. From it he removed a faded journal, different from the others, older, much older. The leather cover appeared cracked with age. The pages had yellowed significantly. Carefully he opened it. This belonged to the first harbor master. Ethan glanced toward the journal. What does it say? The old man flipped through several pages, then stopped. His eyes widened slightly, as though he had found something important, very important. He began reading. October 17th, 1947. The date immediately caught Ethan's attention. Nearly 80 years earlier. The keeper continued. Tonight the fog opened again. The village appeared. The bells rang. And the dead walked home. Silence. The words lingered heavily. The dead walked home. Ethan felt a chill. The keeper read further. Families gathered at the harbor. Some cried, some prayed, some waited until dawn. When the fog returned, the old man paused. His expression darkened. Then he finished reading. They vanished once more. The fire cracked sharply. A burst of sparks danced upward, then disappeared. Ethan stared at the journal. The dead walked home. The phrase echoed through his thoughts. Impossible.
Yet somehow tonight,
had already crossed far beyond ordinary impossibility. Outside, the church bell continued ringing. The distant village remained visible. The lighthouse beam rotated steadily. And somewhere deep within his chest, a strange certainty began growing. A certainty he didn't want. A certainty he couldn't ignore. Something waited for him there. In the village. Across the water. Beyond the lighthouse. The harbor office suddenly grew colder. Not gradually. Instantly. The fire remained burning. Yet the temperature dropped sharply. Both men noticed. The keeper looked toward the door. Then toward the window. His face had gone pale. Ethan? The old man's voice sounded uneasy. Do you feel that? Ethan nodded. The air felt different. Charged somehow. As though a thunderstorm had entered the room. Then came another sound. A knock. 3 slow knocks. Knock. 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 Exactly the same pattern. Again. The keeper closed his eyes briefly. Almost as though he already knew what waited outside. The knocks came once more. Steady. Patient. Certain. Neither man moved. Finally, Ethan approached the door. His pulse hammered. The cold air seemed to grow stronger with every step. He reached the handle, paused, then opened it. The harbor stood empty. At first. Then he looked down. A lantern sat on the porch. Old-fashioned. Brass. Weathered by time. Its flame burned softly despite the wind. And attached to the handle, another letter. Ethan's breath caught. Because, unlike the previous letters, this envelope carried a second name. Ethan Harper. And beneath it, William Harper. His father. Slowly, carefully, he opened it. Inside rested a folded page. The handwriting was unmistakable. His father's. But the message wasn't addressed to him. It was addressed to Ethan, and signed by someone else. Someone whose name made his heart stop. My dearest Ethan, if you're reading this, then the fog finally opened. I've waited a very long time to speak with you. Much longer than you realize. There are things your father couldn't tell you. Things he tried to protect you from. Please don't blame him. He loved you more than anything. Meet me at the church when the bell stops ringing. There's something you deserve to know. Love always. Mom. The world seemed to tilt. The letter trembled in Ethan's hands. His mother. His mother had died 15 years ago. 15 years. He had attended her funeral, held her hand in the hospital, watched her fade away. And yet, the handwriting belonged to her. Without question. Without doubt. The keeper stared at the letter. Speechless. The church bell rang again. Slow. Gentle. Melancholy. And suddenly, a voice drifted through the fog. Soft. Warm. Familiar. The voice Ethan had missed for 15 years. The voice he thought he would never hear again. Ethan. His eyes filled instantly. The voice came again. Closer this time. My sweet boy. The harbor disappeared. The lighthouse disappeared. Everything disappeared. Because he knew that voice. He knew it better than any other voice in the world. His mother. And standing at the edge of the dock, emerging slowly from the fog, was a woman he had spent 15 years grieving. A woman who should not have been there. A woman smiling through tears. A woman reaching out her hand. For a moment, Ethan forgot how to breathe. The fog rolled softly across the harbor. The sea whispered against the docks. The distant church bell continued its slow, mournful rhythm. Yet all of it faded into the background. Because standing at the edge of the dock was his mother, Margaret Harper. The woman he had buried 15 years ago. The woman whose absence had shaped entire chapters of her life. The woman whose voice had comforted him through childhood storms.
The woman who should not have been standing there. And yet, she was. The moonlight touched her face, her smile, her eyes. Every detail felt painfully familiar, painfully real. Tears gathered in Ethan's eyes before he realized it. The years disappeared. The grief disappeared. The loneliness disappeared. Only one thought remained. Mom. The word echoed silently through his heart. The harbor keeper stood frozen behind him. His face had gone pale, almost frightened. Not because he doubted what he saw, because he believed it. And that frightened him more. Ethan. Her voice drifted gently across the water. Warm, kind, exactly as he remembered. The years collapsed completely. For a brief moment, he felt like a child again. Safe, loved, home. She extended her hand, not demanding, not commanding, simply offering, waiting. The sight nearly shattered him.
You ever missed someone so deeply that you would give anything for one more conversation, one more hug, one more smile, one more chance to say the things left unsaid? Many people have. And in that moment, Ethan understood exactly how dangerous that longing could be, because it made everything else disappear. Logic, fear, questions, all of it. The harbor keeper suddenly grabbed his shoulder, hard. Ethan. His voice cut through the spell, sharp, urgent. Don't. The word landed heavily. Ethan turned. Confusion filled his face. What? The keeper's expression carried genuine fear. Not uncertainty, not concern. Fear. Real fear. Do not go to her. The old man's voice trembled slightly. The words felt wrong, cruel even. How could anyone ask that? How could anyone stand between a son and his mother? Yet something in the keeper's eyes stopped Ethan. The old man wasn't being heartless. He was terrified, and that mattered. The church bell rang again. Slow, patient, waiting. Margaret remained at the dock's edge. Her expression never changed, never hardened, never showed frustration. Only sadness, only love, only longing. Then she spoke, and what she said sent a chill through Ethan. I know about the hidden room. The harbor keeper stiffened immediately. Every muscle in his body tightened. Margaret's gaze shifted toward him, then back to Ethan. The room behind the wall. Silence filled the harbor. The keeper's face lost all color, because he had never mentioned the hidden chamber. Not tonight, not to anyone. Yet somehow, she knew. The realization unsettled everyone, including Ethan, especially Ethan, because if she truly knew about the hidden room, then perhaps she wasn't an illusion. Perhaps she wasn't a dream. Perhaps, no. The thought remained unfinished. The harbor keeper stepped forward. Ask her where it is. Margaret smiled softly, almost sadly, then answered before Ethan could speak. Below the lighthouse. The old man's eyes widened. Shock, pure shock, because the answer was correct. How Ethan knew that, he couldn't explain, but he could see it in the keeper's face. She knew something she shouldn't know. The fog thickened around the docks. The church bell continued ringing, and somewhere beyond the lighthouse, the mysterious village shimmered beneath moonlight, waiting, watching, listening. The harbor keeper closed the office door behind them, locked it, then pulled every curtain shut. The room darkened immediately. Only firelight remained. Warm orange shadows danced across the walls. Outside, the voices faded. The bell continued, but softer now, farther away. The old man moved quickly, purposefully. He seemed to have made a decision, a difficult one. For years he had hidden certain truths, protected certain secrets. Now he appeared ready to reveal them. The room exists. His voice sounded heavy, resigned. Ethan sat across from him. The diary, the photographs, the letters, everything remained scattered across the desk, evidence of a mystery decades in the making. What room? The keeper looked toward the wall behind a tall bookshelf, then answered quietly. The one your father found. Silence. The old man stood, crossed the room, placed both hands against the shelf, and pushed. The heavy furniture moved slowly. Dust drifted into the air. Wood scraped softly across the floor. Behind it appeared something unexpected. A narrow iron door, hidden completely within the wall, invisible unless someone knew where to look.
Ethan's pulse quickened. The hidden room. The room his father discovered. The room connected to the lighthouse. The room somehow connected to him. The keeper retrieved a key from around his neck, old, blackened by age. He stared at it for a moment, then unlocked the door. The hinges groaned softly. A cool draft emerged from the darkness beyond. Ancient air, still, undisturbed. The scent carried traces of salt water, old paper, time itself. Inside rested a narrow chamber, small, perhaps 12 feet long, windowless, silent. Rows of shelves lined the walls, filled with journals, boxes, photographs, maps. Decades of research, decades of secrets. The keeper stepped inside first. Ethan followed. His eyes immediately settled on something unusual. A large map mounted on the far wall. Not of the coastline, not of Maine, not of any ordinary place. The map depicted two worlds, side by side, separated by a narrow strip of darkness, connected by a single line. A line leading directly through Blackwater Lighthouse. Ethan stared. The implications felt impossible, yet strangely familiar. The keeper spoke quietly. Your father drew that. The room fell silent. The old man moved toward a wooden cabinet, opened it, removed a thick
journal, much larger than the others. The cover carried only one title, The Crossing. Ethan's heartbeat quickened. The Crossing. The word appeared everywhere. The journals, the letters, the lighthouse, the village. Everything pointed toward it. Everything. The keeper opened the journal. Most pages contained diagrams, observations, notes. The handwriting belonged entirely to Ethan's father. Years of investigation, years of obsession, years of searching. Then a photograph slipped free, floating gently onto the floor. Ethan picked it up and immediately felt his blood run cold. The image showed Blackwater Lighthouse. Nothing unusual about that, except for one detail. Standing beside the lighthouse were three people. His father, Eleanor, and Ethan. Adult Ethan. The Ethan sitting in this room right now. The exact same age, the exact same face, the exact same clothes. The photograph looked decades old, yet somehow he appeared in it. The room seemed to spin. His hands trembled. The keeper stared at the image, then slowly sat down, as though all his strength had suddenly left him, because he recognized it too, and because there was no possible explanation, no rational explanation, no explanation at all. Then Ethan noticed something written beneath the photograph, a date, one that had not happened yet, October 17th, 2026, 10 years in the future, and beneath the date, a single handwritten warning. Whatever happens, do not let Eleanor open the door. For several long seconds, nobody spoke. The hidden room seemed to shrink around them. The air felt heavier, the silence deeper. Ethan stared at the photograph in his trembling hands, a photograph that should not exist, a photograph that showed him standing beside Blackwater Lighthouse, not as a child, not as a future possibility imagined by someone else, as an adult, the same age he was now, the same face, the same jacket. Even the faint scar on his left hand appeared visible. Every detail was correct, painfully correct. The image looked old, years old, perhaps decades, yet the date written beneath it belonged to the future, October 17th, 2026, 10 years from now. The room remained utterly silent. The harbor keeper slowly removed his glasses, then cleaned them, not because they needed cleaning, because his hands needed something to do. People often do that when confronted with impossible things. Small actions, familiar actions, comforting actions, anything to avoid the truth standing directly in front of them. Finally, Ethan found his voice. What is this? The question sounded weak, almost childish, but it was the only question he could ask. The keeper looked exhausted, deeply exhausted, as though every answer carried a cost. I don't know. The honesty surprised Ethan. After all these years, after all these journals, after all this research, the old man still didn't know. The realization somehow made the mystery feel even larger. The keeper pointed toward the journal. There are references. References to what? The future. A pause. The lighthouse sometimes shows things that haven't happened yet. The words settled heavily. Ethan almost laughed. Not because they were funny, because they were absurd. Yet absurdity had become commonplace tonight. The old man continued. Your father called them echoes. Echoes? Fragments of possible futures.
The firelight flickered across the room, casting long shadows across shelves crowded with secrets. The photograph remained in Ethan's hands. The warning beneath it seemed darker now, more urgent, more real. Whatever happens, do not let Eleanor open the door. What door? And why was everyone so afraid of it? Have you ever noticed how every answer in a mystery eventually becomes another question? You find one truth, and suddenly discover 10 more mysteries hiding behind it. That was exactly what Blackwater Lighthouse seemed designed to do. Reveal, then conceal. Answer, then confuse. Like waves erasing footprints from sand. The harbor keeper moved deeper into the hidden room, toward an old grandfather clock standing against the far wall. At first, Ethan hadn't noticed it. The clock looked ordinary, dusty, ancient, forgotten. Yet something about it felt wrong. Subtly wrong. The keeper rested a hand against its wooden frame. His expression softened, almost sadly. Your father hated this thing. Ethan frowned. Why? The old man smiled faintly. Because it shouldn't exist. Another impossible statement, another mystery. The keeper opened the glass panel covering the pendulum. Inside, the brass mechanism remained perfectly preserved. Yet the clock hands had stopped moving long ago. Frozen at a single time. 12:17. The old man pointed toward the face. It always stops there. When? Every time.
Stared. What do you mean every time? The keeper exhaled slowly. The clock works perfectly. It keeps accurate time. It can run for years. Then he looked directly at Ethan. But every October 17th, the silence stretched. It stops at 12:17. A chill moved through the room. October 17th. Tonight. The same date again. The same impossible pattern. Everything seemed connected. The letters, the lighthouse, the village, the crossing, the clock, the date repeated endlessly, like a code waiting to be solved. Then Ethan noticed something. A small brass plaque attached to the base. The inscription had faded with age, yet most of it remained readable. Recovered from Blackwater Lighthouse. His pulse quickened. The clock came from the lighthouse. Of course it did. Everything did. The keeper gently touched the frozen minute hand. For a brief moment, his face changed, a memory passing behind tired eyes. Then he spoke. The last keeper wrote about it. Ethan looked up. What did he say? The old man's voice lowered. He believed time behaves differently near the crossing. Silence. The words felt dangerous somehow. Not because they sounded supernatural, because they sounded plausible. The keeper continued. Sometimes people lose hours. Sometimes they gain them. Sometimes, he hesitated, they return before they leave. The room felt colder. The fire seemed farther away. The hidden chamber darker. Return before they leave. The phrase echoed through Ethan's thoughts, like a riddle, like a warning, like an answer hiding inside nonsense. Then suddenly, tick. Both men froze. The sound came from the clock. Soft, clear, impossible. Tick. Again. The keeper's eyes widened. Tick. The pendulum moved. Once, then again. Slowly, steadily. The clock had begun running. For the first time in years. Neither man spoke. Neither moved. The ticking continued. Tick, tick, tick. The sound filled the hidden room. Every second seemed louder than the last, more important, more deliberate, as though the clock itself had awakened. Then something even stranger happened. The hands began moving, not forward, backward, slowly, relentlessly, turning against time itself. Ethan stared in disbelief. The keeper looked terrified, genuinely terrified, because unlike Ethan, he knew what this meant. What is it? The old man swallowed hard. His voice barely rose above a whisper. It never moves backward. The room felt silent again, except for the ticking. Backward, backward, backward. The clock rewound minute by minute, year by memory, memory by memory. Then, a
A sound echoed through the hidden room, not from the clock, not from outside, from behind the wall. 3 knocks. Knock, knock, knock. Both men turned instantly. The sound came again, closer this time, as though someone stood inside the wall itself. Knock, knock, knock. The keeper's face drained of color, because he recognized the pattern. The same knocks, the same signal, the same impossible visitor. Slowly, very slowly, the wall behind the clock began to crack open. Not physically, not like stone breaking, more like fog appearing where solid brick should be. A thin vertical line of silver light emerged, growing wider, brighter, stronger. The hidden room filled with a pale glow. Neither man could look away. The opening widened further, and beyond it, another room became visible. A room identical to this one. The same shelves, the same desk, the same clock, the same maps, everything identical, except for one detail. Someone sat inside, a man, alone, writing in a journal. The man slowly looked up, and Ethan's heart nearly stopped, because the face staring back at him was his own, older, tired, perhaps 10 years older, but unquestionably him. The older Ethan met his gaze, then calmly wrote something on a piece of paper, folded it, and slid it beneath the glowing opening. The note crossed through the silver light, entering the hidden room, entering Ethan's world. The clock stopped ticking instantly. Silence returned. The glowing opening vanished. The wall became solid once more, as though nothing had happened. Only the folded note remained, resting on the floor, waiting. The note remained on the floor, motionless, ordinary. Yet nothing about it felt ordinary. Not after what had just happened. Not after the wall had opened. Not after another version of Ethan had looked directly into his eyes. Not after a message had crossed from somewhere impossible. The hidden room had fallen completely silent. Even the grandfather clock remained still once more, frozen, watching, waiting. Ethan stared at the folded paper, his pulse hammered against his ribs. Beside him, the harbor keeper looked equally shaken, perhaps more, because,
unlike Ethan, he had spent decades searching for proof, and tonight, proof had finally arrived. The old man spoke first. His voice barely rose above a whisper. "Don't open it." Ethan blinked. "What?" The keeper never looked away from the note. "Not yet." The answer came immediately, firmly, almost urgently. Ethan frowned. "Why?" The old man swallowed, then lowered himself slowly into a chair. His face seemed pale beneath the firelight, older somehow, weary, because he knew things Ethan did not, and those things frightened him. "For years," the keeper began quietly, "we believed the crossing connected places." He paused, then shook his head. "We were wrong." Silence settled across the room. The fire crackled softly. Dust drifted through the warm orange light. The old man continued. "It connects possibilities." The words lingered. Possibilities. Not places, not worlds. Possibilities. Ethan stared, trying to understand, trying to fit the idea into something logical, something familiar, but it resisted. The keeper rubbed his tired eyes, then continued. "Your father discovered it first." A pause. "He believed every choice creates another path." The room remained silent. The harbor keeper pointed toward the wall, toward the place where the opening had appeared. "Sometimes those paths touch." The implication settled slowly, like snow falling across still water. If the keeper was right, then perhaps the man beyond the wall wasn't another person. Perhaps he was another version, another possibility, another Ethan. The thought felt impossible, yet less impossible than it should have, because tonight had already shattered every boundary between reality and mystery. The note remained untouched, waiting, patient. Have you ever wondered how different your life might have been if one decision had changed? One choice, one conversation, one missed opportunity. A different school, a different city, a different path.
Most people wonder about such things briefly, then move on. But what if those other lives continued somewhere? What if those possibilities never disappeared? What if they were still unfolding? The question lingered in Ethan's thoughts, and for reasons he couldn't explain, the answer frightened him. Finally, he picked up the note. The paper felt warm, strangely warm, as though someone had handed it to him moments ago. The handwriting on the outside looked familiar, not identical to his own. Older, more deliberate, more practiced, yet unmistakably similar. His hand trembled slightly as he unfolded it. The message contained only one sentence, 7 words. Simple, direct, terrifying. Don't trust the woman at the window. The room fell silent. Ethan read it again, and again, and again. The meaning never changed. Don't trust the woman at the window. The harbor keeper closed his eyes. Slowly, painfully, as though he had expected this. What does it mean? Ethan asked. The old man looked toward the darkened office beyond the hidden room, then answered quietly, I think you already know. The words settled heavily, because Ethan did know, or at least he suspected. The woman at the window, Eleanor. The woman appearing throughout the night. The woman holding photographs. The woman calling his name. The woman claiming to know him. The woman who might be his sister. A cold sensation moved through him, not because he feared her, because he didn't, and that frightened him even more. Suddenly, a sharp gust of wind rattled the harbor office. The building groaned softly. The fire flickered, then nearly went out. Both men turned toward the doorway. The temperature had dropped again. The cold arrived instantly, unnaturally, as though someone had opened a door into winter itself. Then came another sound. Not knocking, not footsteps. Music. Soft, faint, distant. A piano. The melody drifted through the walls. Gentle, beautiful, melancholy. Ethan froze, because he recognized it immediately. The song. His mother used to play it, every Sunday evening, without fail. The realization hit him like a wave. His chest tightened. His eyes stung. For 15 years, he had not heard that melody. Not once. Yet now it echoed through the harbor office, softly, patiently, calling. The keeper's expression darkened. That's not possible. The words barely escaped his lips. Ethan moved toward the doorway. The music grew louder, still distant, yet unmistakable. Each note carried memories. Family dinners, rainy afternoons, childhood laughter, comfort, love, home. The song wrapped around his heart like a forgotten embrace. And despite every warning, despite every mystery, despite every impossible thing that had happened tonight, he wanted to follow it. The realization startled him, because part of him knew exactly how dangerous that
was. Yet another part, a deeper part, wanted nothing else. The music drifted onward, leading somewhere, leading him. They emerged from the hidden room. The harbor office appeared unchanged. The fire burned quietly. The desk remained cluttered with journals and photographs. The windows remained covered. Everything normal, everything familiar, except for one detail. The piano music was coming from outside, beyond the walls, beyond the harbor, beyond the fog. The keeper walked toward the nearest window, carefully lifted the curtain, and immediately stepped backward. His face had gone completely white. Ethan hurried forward, then looked outside. The harbor vanished from his thoughts instantly, because standing across the street, inside an abandoned building that had stood empty for 20 years, a light glowed in an upstairs window. Warm yellow light, gentle, inviting. And seated beside that window, a woman played the piano. The melody drifted through the night. The same melody, the same song, the same impossible music. Ethan's breath caught, because the woman wasn't Eleanor, and she wasn't his mother. At least not exactly. She appeared younger, perhaps 25, beautiful, elegant, dressed in clothing decades out of date. She continued playing, never looking away from the piano, never acknowledging them. The keeper stared, speechless.
then whispered something Ethan barely heard. No. The old man seemed genuinely shaken, more shaken than at any point tonight. Who is she? Ethan asked. The keeper swallowed hard. His answer emerged slowly, reluctantly, as though speaking her name carried consequences. That's Abigail. Silence. The music continued, soft, beautiful, heartbreaking. The keeper's eyes remained fixed on the woman, on the light, on the impossible scene unfolding across the street. Then he spoke the words that made Ethan's blood run cold. She died in 1954. The piano abruptly stopped. The woman lifted her head, slowly, deliberately, and for the first time, she looked directly at Ethan, then raised one finger, pointing toward the lighthouse, before vanishing from the window entirely. The room beyond her fell dark, instantly, as though nobody had ever been there. And at that exact moment, the church bell across the water stopped ringing. The bell stopped, and the silence that followed felt heavier than any sound. For hours, the distant church bell had echoed across the water, slow, steady, patient, like a heartbeat belonging to the mysterious village beyond the fog. Now it was gone. The absence felt wrong, unnatural, as though something important had just ended, or perhaps begun. Ethan remained frozen beside the window. The abandoned building across the street stood dark once more, empty, silent. No sign of the piano, no sign of Abigail, no sign of the warm yellow light. Only darkness, only shadows, only questions. The harbor keeper slowly lowered the curtain. His hands trembled, not from age, from memory. Because unlike Ethan, he knew who Abigail was, or rather, who she had been. The old man stared into the fire. For a long moment he said nothing, then finally spoke. She disappeared the same year the second lighthouse vanished. The words drifted softly through the room. Ethan listened. Outside, the fog rolled slowly through the harbor streets. The sea whispered against weathered docks, and far beyond both, the village remained visible, waiting. The keeper continued. Abigail Turner was a teacher, a pianist, a storyteller. A sad smile crossed his face. My grandmother knew her. The room fell silent again. The old man seemed lost somewhere in the past, following memories only he could see. Then he sighed. One evening she walked toward Blackwater Lighthouse. The familiar pattern, the same story again. Someone walks toward the lighthouse. Someone disappears. The mystery repeats, generation after generation. What happened? Ethan asked quietly. The harbor keeper looked toward the sea, toward the glowing lighthouse beyond the fog. No one knows. The answer felt almost inevitable. No one knows. The most common truth surrounding Blackwater. The most frustrating truth. The most terrifying truth. The old man stood, slowly, carefully, then moved toward the harbor office door. His expression had changed, resolved, certain, as though a decision had finally been made. It's time. Ethan frowned. For what? The keeper unlocked the door. The cold night air immediately drifted inside, carrying the scent of salt water and fog. The old man looked directly at him, for answers. Have you ever reached a point where curiosity becomes stronger than fear? A moment when not knowing hurts more than discovering the truth? Most people encounter that feeling eventually. Sometimes in relationships, sometimes in life, sometimes
in mysteries. Ethan had reached that point tonight. The questions had become too large, too personal, too important. And somewhere beyond the water, the answers waited. A small fishing boat rocked gently beside the harbor, not the mysterious boat from earlier. A real boat, old, reliable, ordinary. The keeper climbed aboard first, then gestured for Ethan to follow. Neither spoke. Words felt unnecessary now. The lighthouse beam rotated slowly across the ocean, sweeping across waves, sweeping across fog, sweeping across the impossible village beyond. The engine started with a low rumble. The boat eased away from the dock.
The harbor gradually disappeared behind them. The town lights grew smaller. The shoreline faded. Soon only ocean remained. Ocean, fog, and the lighthouse. The sea felt unusually calm, almost perfectly still. No strong winds, no crashing waves, only gentle motion, like breathing. The harbor keeper guided the boat carefully through the darkness. His eyes remained fixed ahead, focused, determined, as though he had waited decades for this journey. Perhaps he had. The lighthouse grew larger, closer, more imposing. Moonlight illuminated its weathered stone walls, its cracked windows, its towering silhouette. The structure looked ancient, older than memory, older than reason. And yet its beacon burned brighter than ever. The light swept across the water, then across the boat. For one brief moment, Ethan felt something strange, a sensation impossible to describe, like being recognized, like the lighthouse knew him. The thought should have sounded ridiculous. Instead, it felt true. Halfway to the island, the fog changed, not gradually, instantly. One moment it drifted normally across the water. The next, it began opening, parting, moving aside, like curtains revealing a stage. The harbor keeper slowed the boat. His breathing became shallow, uneasy, anticipatory. Ethan. His voice sounded distant, almost reverent. "Look." Ethan turned, and his breath caught. The village stood fully visible now, not distant anymore, not hidden, not vague. Clear, detailed, real. The shoreline stretched across the horizon. Dozens of homes glowed warmly beneath moonlight. Street lamps illuminated narrow roads. Trees swayed gently in the night breeze. Smoke drifted from chimneys. The village looked peaceful, comfortable, alive. Yet one detail immediately felt wrong. Very wrong. The people. Hundreds of them stood near the waterfront, watching, silent, motionless. Every face turned toward the sea, toward the lighthouse, toward the boat, toward Ethan. The sight should have felt threatening. Instead, it felt heartbreaking, because their expressions carried only one emotion: hope. The realization struck him unexpectedly. They looked hopeful, like people waiting for someone, waiting for something, waiting for years, perhaps generations. The harbor keeper whispered softly, "They're here." The words barely escaped him. "They always come when the crossing opens." Ethan stared. The crowd stretched along the shoreline. Young, old, children, families. Entire lives frozen within that impossible village. Then something caught his attention. Near the center of the crowd, a woman, standing alone, watching him. Eleanor. The same face, the same calm eyes, the same sadness. She stood perfectly still, then slowly raised her hand, not waving, not signaling, simply acknowledging him. The gesture felt strangely intimate, familiar, as though she had been waiting far longer than he realized. The boat continued forward, closer, closer, closer. The lighthouse loomed overhead now, its stone walls rising from black rocks, ancient, silent, watching. The village shimmered beyond it. The crowd remained waiting. The sea remained calm. Everything felt suspended between worlds. Then suddenly, a voice spoke behind Ethan. Soft, clear, impossible. "You finally came." His heart nearly stopped. The voice came from inside the boat. He turned instantly. The harbor keeper turned too, and both men froze. Because sitting quietly at the rear of the boat, where nobody had been moments earlier, sat Ethan's father, William Harper, exactly as he appeared before his death. Not older, not younger, wearing the same coat, the same gentle expression, the same tired eyes. The ocean seemed to vanish. The lighthouse vanished. The village vanished.
Everything vanished because Ethan was staring at the man he had buried 10 years ago. And his father smiled softly, the way he always had, then spoke again. "There isn't much time. There isn't much time." The words drifted across the boat like a whisper carried by the sea. Ethan stared. His father sat only a few feet away, close enough to touch, close enough to hear every breath, close enough to erase 10 years of grief in a single impossible moment. William Harper looked exactly as Ethan remembered him. The same
Calm, weathered coat, the same kind eyes, the same gentle smile that always appeared when Ethan was worried. For several seconds, Ethan couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't think. His entire world had narrowed to a single impossible fact. His father was here. The harbor keeper remained frozen. Shock filled his face. Yet, beneath the shock, recognition. As though some part of him had always believed this day might come. The boat drifted slowly toward Blackwater Lighthouse. The sea remained strangely calm. The fog hovered motionless around them, and beyond the island, the village glowed beneath moonlight, waiting, watching, listening. William looked toward the lighthouse, then back at Ethan. His smile faded slightly, not completely, only enough to reveal sadness underneath, a deep sadness, the kind carried by people who leave important things unfinished. "You've grown up." The words sounded simple, ordinary, yet Ethan felt tears gathering immediately, because they were exactly the sort of thing his father would say. No grand speeches, no dramatic revelations, just honesty, just love, just him. "Dad." The word broke in Ethan's throat. William's eyes softened. For a brief moment, neither spoke. The years between them seemed to dissolve. Hospital rooms, funerals, loneliness, loss. Everything faded, leaving only father and son. The harbor keeper quietly looked away, giving them privacy, giving them space, giving them something most people never receive. One final conversation. Have you ever imagined what you would say if someone you lost suddenly returned? What questions would matter? What regrets would remain? What words would come first? Most people think they know, until the moment arrives. Then everything changes, because the heart rarely follows a script. Ethan finally found his voice. Was it really you? The question escaped before he could stop it. William smiled sadly. Yes. A pause. And no. The answer felt familiar. Everything surrounding Blackwater seemed to exist between certainty and mystery, between truth and possibility, between worlds. William glanced toward the water, toward the lighthouse, toward the village beyond. The crossing isn't what people think. His voice remained calm, gentle. The same voice Ethan remembered from childhood. The same voice that once read bedtime stories during storms. The same voice that taught him how to fish, how to ride a bike, how to keep going after life broke your heart. The crossing connects unfinished stories. Silence followed. The waves lapped softly against the boat. The lighthouse beams swept across the ocean. William continued. People who carry unfinished promises, unfinished love, unfinished goodbyes. His eyes met Ethan's. And unfinished grief. The words landed heavily, because Ethan understood immediately. His father hadn't returned because of magic, or destiny, or miracles. He returned because something remained unfinished, something important, something waiting. The realization settled between them. Then Ethan asked the question he had carried for 10 years, the question hidden beneath every other question, the question grief asks when nobody is listening. Did you know you were dying? William's expression softened. The answer arrived quietly. Yes. The honesty hurt and healed at the same time. Ethan looked away, toward the sea, toward the horizon, anywhere except his father's eyes, because tears had finally begun falling, and he suddenly felt 12 years old again. Not 32, not strong, not prepared, just a son who missed his father. William remained silent, allowing the tears, allowing the pain.
allowing the truth. Then he spoke. I was afraid. The admission surprised Ethan. His father rarely admitted fear. William smiled faintly. I wasn't afraid of dying. A pause. I was afraid of leaving. The words shattered something inside Ethan, not painfully, tenderly, because suddenly he understood. His father hadn't feared death. He feared absence. He feared becoming a memory. He feared leaving the people he loved behind. The realization felt overwhelming, human, beautiful, heartbreaking. For several moments, neither spoke. The ocean carried them closer to the lighthouse, closer to the answers, closer to whatever waited beneath the tower. Then William reached into his coat pocket, carefully, slowly, and removed a small object, a silver pocket watch. Ethan immediately recognized it. His grandfather's watch, the family heirloom, the one believed lost years ago. William held it gently, almost reverently, then handed it over. Ethan accepted it with trembling hands. The metal felt warm, unexpectedly warm. The watch had stopped, frozen at a specific time, 12:17, the same time as the clock, the same time appearing everywhere, again and again and again. William noticed Ethan's expression, then nodded. That's when it happened. The words emerged softly.
Calm. Answer to a question Ethan hadn't yet asked. What happened? The lighthouse loomed larger. The village glowed brighter. The sea seemed quieter, as though even the world wanted to hear the answer. William looked toward Eleanor, standing on the distant shore, then toward Ethan, and finally spoke. Eleanor saved your life. Silence. Complete silence. The statement seemed impossible, confusing, wrong. Ethan stared. What? William swallowed slowly. The sadness in his eyes deepened. 30 years ago, his voice lowered. You drowned. The world seemed to stop. The boat, the sea, the lighthouse, everything. Ethan blinked, certain he had misheard. I what? William's answer remained steady. You were 5 years old. The ocean was rough. You fell from the rocks. The images formed instantly. Not memories, fragments, feelings, fear, cold water, darkness, a scream. Then, a flash. A woman's voice, holding him, pulling him upward. Light breaking through waves. The memory struck with such force that Ethan gasped. William continued. You died. The words landed like stones. Heavy, unavoidable, real. The harbor keeper closed his eyes. Because he knew this story. Because he had heard it before. Because he wished it weren't true. William's voice trembled slightly now. For the first time. We lost you. Tears filled his eyes. Not dramatic tears. Quiet tears. The kind parents cry when remembering something they never recovered from. We lost you for 7 minutes. The ocean seemed impossibly still. The lighthouse being rotated slowly across the water. William looked toward the village. Then back at Ethan. Eleanor crossed. A pause. She brought you back. The words settled heavily. Eleanor. The girl who disappeared. The woman who never aged. The sister he never knew. The mystery at the center of everything. She saved him. The realization changed everything. Every photograph, every letter, every clue, every appearance, every warning, every sacrifice. William continued. But the crossing took something. His voice lowered. The crossing always takes something. Ethan's heart pounded. What did it take? William looked away. Toward the lighthouse. Toward the dark rocks beneath it. Toward a place hidden from view. Then he answered. It took her future. Silence. Pure silence. The meaning arrived slowly. Painfully. Eleanor never aged. Never moved forward. Never escaped. Because she paid the price. For him. The realization shattered Ethan completely. Not from fear. Not from mystery. From love.
from sacrifice, from understanding what someone had given up so he could live. Tears blurred his vision. He could barely breathe. Eleanor had sacrificed her entire life for his, and he never knew. Not once. Not for 30 years. The boat gently touched the rocks beneath Blackwater Lighthouse. The journey was over. The lighthouse tower rose above them, ancient, waiting. William stood, his expression solemn now, certain, resolved. The door is below. The words felt final, important. The harbor keeper stepped onto the rocks. Ethan followed. William remained beside the boat, watching. Then Ethan realized something. His father wasn't coming with them. The realization hurt immediately. Dad? William smiled. The same smile. The same kindness. The same love. Always. I can't go any farther. The tears returned instantly, because Ethan finally understood. This wasn't a reunion. It was a goodbye. The goodbye they never had. William's eyes glistened beneath moonlight. Then he spoke the words every grieving child hopes to hear. The words Ethan had needed for 10 years. The words that finally healed something broken inside him. None of this was your fault. The ocean whispered against the rocks. The lighthouse beam swept overhead. And William Harper slowly began fading into silver mist. His final smile remained. His final warmth remained. His final love remained. Then he was gone. Only the pocket watch remained in Ethan's hand, frozen forever at 12:17. And beneath the lighthouse, a massive iron door slowly began opening by itself. The iron door groaned, slowly, reluctantly, as though it had remained closed for centuries. The sound echoed beneath Blackwater Lighthouse, deep, ancient, unnatural. Ethan stood motionless on the wet rocks. The silver pocket watch remained clutched tightly in his hand. His father's final words still echoed through his heart. None of this was your fault. The sentence felt simple, yet it carried the weight of 10 years. 10 years of guilt. 10 years of unanswered questions. 10 years of wondering whether he could have changed something, saved something, fixed something. And now, for the first time, that burden felt lighter. Not gone, but lighter. The sea whispered around the island. The lighthouse beam rotated overhead. And below,
Calm. The massive iron door continued opening. Darkness waited beyond. The harbor keeper approached cautiously. His weathered face appeared pale beneath moonlight. Not from fear alone, from awe. Because after decades of searching, decades of questions, the door had finally opened. And not by force, not by keys, not by luck. It had opened for Ethan. The realization unsettled him. The old man glanced toward the doorway, then toward Ethan. We don't have much time. The familiar phrase again. Tonight seemed governed by time. The stopped clock, the pocket watch, the future photograph. Everything pointed toward a single moment approaching. Something important. Something inevitable. The harbor keeper stepped inside first. A narrow stone staircase descended beneath the lighthouse, spiraling downward into darkness. The walls glistened with moisture. Ancient stone, ancient secrets, ancient memories. Ethan followed. The air felt colder with every step. Not physically colder, different, charged, as though invisible electricity filled the tunnel. The sensation grew stronger deeper underground. Soon the sound of the sea faded behind them, then vanished completely. Only silence remained, and the soft echo of footsteps. Down, down, down. The staircase seemed endless. The deeper they descended, the stranger everything felt. Time itself appeared distorted. Moments stretched, thoughts slowed. Even breathing felt different. Ethan couldn't explain it, yet somehow he knew the crossing was near. Have you ever walked into a place that felt disconnected from the rest of the world? A place where ordinary rules seemed weaker? A place where time felt strange? Some people experience that feeling in old churches, others in forgotten forests or abandoned homes. Certain places seem to exist between moments, between memories, between realities. The deeper Ethan descended, the stronger that feeling became. Eventually, the staircase ended. A vast chamber opened before them,
and Ethan immediately stopped, speechless. The underground room stretched farther than seemed possible, far larger than the lighthouse above. The ceiling disappeared into shadows. Ancient stone pillars rose from the darkness, and at the center, a circular pool of perfectly still water reflected pale silver light. The sight stole every remaining thought from his mind, because the water glowed, not brightly, softly, gently, like moonlight trapped beneath glass. The harbor keeper stared. His expression carried equal parts wonder and fear. Neither spoke. Words felt inadequate. The chamber seemed alive somehow, not alive in the ordinary sense, aware, listening, waiting. The pool remained perfectly still. No ripples, no movement, only reflection, only silence. Then Ethan noticed something. Shapes beneath the surface. Hundreds of them, thousands perhaps. Faint images drifting within the water. Faces, places, memories, moments. The realization struck immediately. The pool wasn't reflecting the chamber. It was reflecting lives, entire lives. The harbor keeper slowly approached the edge. His voice barely rose above a whisper. The memory sea. Ethan turned. The what? The old man never looked away from the glowing water. Your father called it that. A pause. The place where unfinished stories remain. The words settled heavily. Unfinished stories. Again. Everything returned to the same idea. Promises, goodbyes, love, loss, the crossing. The chamber seemed built around those things, built around human hearts. Then suddenly, the surface of the water moved. One small ripple, then another, expanding outward, growing, spreading, until the entire pool shimmered with silver light. Neither man moved, neither breathed. The water brightened, the chamber filled with pale illumination, and images began appearing. Not reflections, visions, memories. The first showed a young sailor, standing on a ship during a storm, terrified, lost. The image shifted. The sailor embraced his wife, then vanished. Another appeared, a little girl holding a red balloon, laughing, running through sunlight, then fading away. Another, and another, and another. Hundreds of stories drifted across the water, thousands of lives, countless moments, love, grief, hope, regret. The entire chamber seemed filled with human memory. The sight overwhelmed Ethan, not because it frightened him, because it felt beautiful, heartbreakingly beautiful. A reminder that every life leaves something behind. Every person matters. Every story continues somewhere, even after endings. Then one image appeared larger than the rest, stronger, brighter. The water calmed instantly, the chamber grew silent, and Ethan felt his heart stop. Because the memory belonged to Eleanor. A teenage girl stood beside Blackwater Lighthouse, 16 years old, the same age from the newspaper photograph, the same face, the same eyes, the same quiet sadness. The vision unfolded slowly, like pages turning in a forgotten book. Eleanor walked toward the sea, toward the rocks, toward
Calm, the lighthouse. Then she stopped. Someone stood waiting. A small boy, 5 years old. Ethan. The memory struck him like lightning. Fragments exploded through his mind. Cold water, darkness, fear, a wave, falling, sinking, the ocean closing above him. Then, Eleanor, jumping, without hesitation, without fear, without thinking. She dove into the sea. The memory intensified. The chamber disappeared. The present disappeared. Only the vision remained. Ethan watched himself sink deeper beneath black water. Lifeless. Still. Gone. Then, Eleanor reached him. She wrapped her arms around him, pulled him upward, toward the surface, toward life, toward hope. And then, something impossible happened. The ocean opened. A doorway appeared beneath the water. A doorway made entirely of silver light. The crossing. The original crossing. The moment everything changed. Eleanor looked toward the light,
toward the impossible opening, then made a choice. A choice nobody asked her to make. A choice nobody should ever have to make. She stepped through, carrying Ethan with her. The vision froze. The chamber fell silent. The memory sea grew still once more. And suddenly a voice echoed throughout the underground room. Soft, gentle, familiar. Eleanor's voice. You weren't supposed to see this. Ethan spun around instantly. The harbor keeper did too. The chamber stood empty. For a moment. Then silver light gathered near the far side of the pool, growing brighter, stronger, taking shape. Slowly, a figure emerged. Not a memory, not a vision, not a reflection. Eleanor herself, standing beside the glowing water, watching Ethan, and for the first time all night, tears filled her eyes.
The underground chamber felt completely silent. The glowing memory sea reflected silver light across ancient stone walls. The lighthouse above seemed impossibly distant now, as though the world Ethan once knew existed somewhere far away, somewhere unreachable, because standing across the water was Eleanor. Not a vision, not a memory, not a ghost. Eleanor, real, present, watching him with eyes filled with tears. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The harbor keeper remained frozen beside the pool. His face carried the expression of a man witnessing something he had spent half a lifetime searching for. Yet even he seemed afraid. Not of Eleanor, of what her presence meant. The memory seas shimmered softly. The underground chamber breathed with silence, and Ethan simply stared, because for 30 years, every mystery had led here. Every clue, every letter, every impossible photograph, every appearance in the fog, everything. And now she stood before him, the woman who saved his life, the woman who sacrificed her future, the woman everyone warned him about, the woman everyone searched for, the woman who might be his sister. Eleanor smiled sadly, a smile carrying decades of loneliness, decades of waiting, decades of unfinished words. You finally know. Her voice echoed softly through the chamber, gentle, warm, tired. Ethan swallowed. His throat felt painfully tight. You saved me. The words barely escaped him. Eleanor looked toward the glowing water, then nodded, slowly, quietly, as though the truth no longer mattered, as though saving him had never been the important part. The realization unsettled him. Because if saving his life wasn't the center of this story, then what was? The harbor keeper finally found his voice. His words came softly, respectfully, almost reverently. What happened to you? Eleanor closed her eyes briefly, and when she opened them again, the sadness had deepened. Because some stories hurt no matter how many times they're told. Have you ever carried a secret for so long that it became part of you? Not something hidden from others, something hidden from yourself. A truth too large, too painful, too complicated. A truth that slowly becomes your entire life. That was Eleanor's burden. And tonight, for the first time, she was ready to share it. The silver water moved gently. Ripples spread across its surface, as though the memory sea itself wanted to listen. Eleanor stepped closer. The pale glow illuminated her face. For the first time, Ethan noticed how tired she looked. Not physically, emotionally. The exhaustion of someone who had spent decades waiting for a moment that might never arrive. When I crossed, her voice remained calm, steady. I thought I was saving you. The chamber listened. The water listened. Even the silence seemed to listen. Eleanor continued. I didn't understand the price. Her eyes drifted toward the pool, toward reflections only she could see. I was 16. A pause. I thought sacrifices were simple. The words lingered. Simple. Young people often believe sacrifices end when they're made. Life eventually teaches otherwise. Eleanor smiled faintly.
without humor, without joy. When I stepped through the crossing, she looked directly at Ethan. It didn't take my future. The statement surprised him, because that's exactly what everyone believed, what his father believed, what the journal suggested, what the evidence seemed to prove. Eleanor shook her head. No. The silver reflections danced softly across her eyes. It took my place. Silence followed. The meaning arrived slowly, confusingly, like fog drifting across water. My place? Ethan asked. Eleanor nodded. I no longer belonged to either side. The words settled heavily. Neither side. Not living, not dead, not here, not there. The realization chilled him, because suddenly her appearances made sense. The photographs, the fog, the lighthouse, the village. She wasn't trapped in one world. She was trapped between them, forever. The harbor keeper lowered his head, as though hearing something deeply tragic. Perhaps he was. Eleanor continued quietly. For 30 years, she looked toward the distant darkness. I've existed between stories. The sentence carried heartbreaking weight. Between stories. Not living a life, not ending one. Simply waiting, watching, existing. The loneliness of it felt overwhelming. Then Ethan asked the question that had haunted him all night. The question everything seemed determined to avoid. Why do people think you're my sister? The chamber fell silent. Even the memory sea seemed to pause. Eleanor's expression changed immediately. The sadness deepened. Not because the answer frightened her, but because it hurt. For several moments she said nothing. Then finally,
Because I am. The world stopped. Not dramatically. Not violently. Quietly. Completely. The words echoed through Ethan's mind. Because I am. The harbor keeper closed his eyes, as though the truth finally spoken carried enormous weight. Ethan stared, unable to breathe, unable to think, unable to process what he'd heard. His sister, not metaphorically, not symbolically, his actual sister, his blood, his family, the woman he spent 30 years never knowing, the woman who saved his life, the woman who disappeared before he could remember her. The realization struck with devastating force. All the photographs suddenly made sense. The letters, the hidden documents, the birth certificate, everything. His father had hidden the truth. Not because he was ashamed, because he was trying to protect them. Both of them. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, the same tears gathering in Ethan's. You were too young to remember. Her voice trembled slightly. For a while I hated that. A sad smile appeared. I wanted you to remember me. The chamber remained still. The memory sea glowed softly. Eleanor continued. Then I realized something. She looked at him, really looked at him, the way family does, the way only family can. You got to live. Silence. The words shattered him, not because they were sad, because they were selfless. Eleanor had spent 30 years alone, 30 years trapped between worlds, 30 years watching life move forward without her, and somehow she remained grateful, grateful that he lived, grateful that her sacrifice mattered. The realization felt almost unbearable. Tears slipped down Ethan's face. He didn't stop them, didn't hide them, didn't care, because for the first time in his life, he wasn't grieving a mystery. He was grieving a person, a sister. Then suddenly, the memory sea erupted. A violent wave of silver light exploded across the chamber. The water surged upward. The ground trembled. Ancient stone cracked. The lighthouse above groaned. The entire underground room shook violently. Everyone turned toward the pool. Its surface churned wildly now. No longer calm. No longer peaceful. The silver light brightened until it became almost impossible to look at. The harbor keeper
chamber staggered backward, his face drained of color, because he knew what was happening, and he feared it. Eleanor. His voice cracked. No. Eleanor closed her eyes. The sadness vanished. Acceptance replaced it. As though she had always known this moment would come. The water roared louder. The chamber shook harder. Then a massive shape began emerging from the center of the memory sea. Not a person. Not a memory. Something older. Something ancient. Something connected to the crossing itself. Silver mist gathered, swirling upward, taking form, growing larger, taller, stronger. The air became impossible to breathe. The light became blinding. And then, a voice echoed through the chamber. Not human, not entirely. Ancient, immense, terrifying. The voice spoke a single sentence. One sentence that made Eleanor's face go pale. The dead has come due. The dead has come due. The words echoed through the underground chamber long after the voice fell silent. Ancient, immense, unavoidable. They seemed to vibrate within the stone itself, within the water, within Ethan's chest. The memory sea churned violently. Silver waves crashed against invisible shores. Light exploded across the vast cavern. Ancient pillars trembled. Dust rained from the ceiling. And rising from the center of the glowing water, the towering figure continued taking shape. Mist and light twisted together, forming something neither human nor entirely unrecognizable. It possessed no clear face, no distinct features, yet somehow it felt familiar. As though every person who looked upon it saw something different. A reflection, a memory, a truth. The harbor keeper staggered backward. Fear filled his eyes. Pure fear, not the fear of danger, the fear of understanding. Because after decades spent studying the crossing, he finally stood before whatever governed it. And he wished he did not. Eleanor remained motionless, her face pale, her shoulders tense, not surprised, not confused. She had known this moment was coming. For years, perhaps for decades. The realization struck Ethan immediately. You knew. His voice sounded distant, small, lost within the roar of silver water. Eleanor looked at him. Tears shimmered in her eyes. Then she nodded, slowly, painfully. I always knew. The answer hurt more than he expected, because suddenly everything made sense. The waiting, the letters, the photographs, the urgency, the unfinished stories. She wasn't trying to solve a mystery. She was preparing for an ending. The thought settled heavily over them.
Calm. The chamber continued rising, its form now stretched nearly to the cavern ceiling. Silver light poured from it, not blinding, beautiful, and terrifying at the same time. The ancient voice echoed once more. The balance must be restored. The water surged again. The chamber shook violently. Stone cracked somewhere in the darkness. The lighthouse above groaned. The sound echoed through the cavern like distant thunder. Ethan stared at the towering presence. What are you? The question escaped before he could stop it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the immense figure slowly turned toward him and answered, I am what remains. The words carried impossible weight, not threatening, not cruel, simply true. The harbor keeper lowered his gaze, almost reverently, as though standing before something far older than understanding. The voice continued, I am every promise kept. Silver light pulsed across the water. I am every promise broken. The chamber glowed brighter. I am every unfinished story. The memory sea erupted. Thousands of reflections appeared simultaneously. Faces, lives, moments, generations, all swirling beneath the surface. The realization struck Ethan. This wasn't a creature, not really. It was the crossing itself, or perhaps the memory of it. the living accumulation of every life touched by its power, every sacrifice, every miracle, every loss, every reunion. The weight of countless human stories gathered into one impossible presence. And tonight, it had come for Eleanor. Have you ever felt the cost of something only after receiving its gift? A kindness, a sacrifice, a second chance. At first, all you notice is what you've gained. Only later do you realize what someone else gave up. That understanding often arrives too late, and when it does, it changes everything. Eleanor stepped closer to the memory sea. The silver light surrounded her, wrapped gently around her figure, almost lovingly, as though recognizing an old friend, an old debt, an old promise. Ethan, her voice remained calm, gentle, the same voice that had called his name through fog, the same voice that had waited 30 years. He looked at her immediately. No, the word escaped before she spoke another sentence, because part of him already knew. Part of him understood exactly where this was heading, and he refused to accept it. Eleanor smiled sadly, the way people smile when they know something difficult must happen. You need to listen. No. His voice broke. The chamber shook again. The lighthouse groaned overhead. The silver giant remained watching, waiting, patient. Eleanor took another step forward. The crossing borrowed time. Silence. The words felt dangerous, final. The night I saved you, she swallowed slowly. It gave you years that should have ended. Ethan stared. The implications hit him instantly. No. Again, the same answer, the only answer he wanted. But Eleanor gently shook her head. It wasn't free. The chamber darkened slightly. The silver light pulsed. The giant figure remained silent, listening, watching. Eleanor looked directly into Ethan's eyes, and for the first time all night, he saw fear. Not fear for herself, fear for him. I became the payment. The words landed like stones, heavy, cold, unavoidable. The truth finally stood exposed, not hidden, not complicated, not mysterious, simple, heartbreaking. She paid for his life, every day, every year, every missed birthday, every missed holiday, every missed moment. She paid. And tonight, the debt was ending. The realization shattered him, because suddenly every warning made sense. Every photograph, every appearance, every clue, every message. Everything had been leading here, toward goodbye. Not reunion, goodbye. The thought felt unbearable. The harbor keeper stepped forward, his voice trembling. There has to be another way. The old man sounded desperate, because he loved Eleanor too. Not as family, as history, as hope, as proof that some mysteries deserve answers. The giant figure slowly turned toward him, its silver form shimmering, then answered. There is. Silence. Everyone froze. Even the water seemed to pause. The harbor keeper blinked. Ethan stared. Eleanor's expression changed immediately. Fear. Real fear. The giant continued. The debt may be transferred. The chamber fell silent. Completely silent. Transferred. The word lingered. Dangerous. Tempting. Terrible. Ethan understood instantly. The realization struck like lightning. The crossing offered a choice. A replacement. Someone else could take Eleanor's place. Someone else could remain between worlds. Someone else could carry the burden. The giant looked directly at Ethan, and though it possessed no eyes, he felt its gaze, felt its attention, felt its question. The chamber seemed to hold.
Calm, its breath. The water glowed softly. The lighthouse groaned overhead. The entire world waited. Then, the The giant spoke again. One final sentence. A sentence that made Eleanor cry out in horror. A sentence that made the harbor keeper stumble backward. A sentence that froze Ethan completely. The brother may choose to stay. The brother may choose to stay. The words lingered in the underground chamber. Heavy, immovable, final. The memory sea glowed beneath ancient stone arches. Silver light rippled across the cavern walls. And for a moment, nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Because everyone understood exactly what the crossing was offering. A trade, a substitution, a sacrifice. Ethan could remain. Eleanor could leave. The debt would be paid. The balance restored. The crossing satisfied. Simple. Cruel. Impossible. No. Eleanor's voice shattered the silence instantly. The single word echoed through the chamber. Sharp. Fierce. Certain. More forceful than anything Ethan had heard from her all night. For the first time, she sounded angry. Not afraid. Not sad. Angry. The silver giant remained motionless. Watching. Waiting. Patient. As ancient things often are. Eleanor stepped between Ethan and the glowing water. Protectively. Instinctively. Like she had done 30 years ago. The realization struck him unexpectedly. Even now, after everything, she was still trying to save him, still protecting him, still sacrificing herself. The thought hurt more than anything else. The giant's voice rolled across the cavern. The choice belongs to him. Eleanor shook her head immediately. No. The answer came without hesitation. No. Again. Stronger. More desperate. The giant remained silent, because the crossing wasn't speaking to her anymore. It was speaking to Ethan, and everyone knew it. The harbor keeper slowly lowered his gaze. His expression carried heartbreak, because there are some decisions nobody should have to make, and yet life asks them anyway. Have you ever loved someone enough to suffer in their place? Not in theory, not in imagination, in reality. Would you carry their pain if you could? Would you trade places? Most people want to say yes, but when the moment arrives, the answer becomes far more complicated, because love isn't only sacrifice. Love is also letting people choose, and that truth can be devastating. Ethan looked at Eleanor, really looked at her. For the first time beyond the mystery, beyond the photographs, beyond the impossible events, he saw his sister. The sister he never knew. The sister who should have grown older, should have built a life, should have fallen in love, should have laughed at family dinners, should have celebrated birthdays, should have lived. Instead, she spent 30 years trapped between worlds, alone, waiting, watching, existing. The injustice of it felt unbearable. The silence stretched. The memory sea shimmered softly. Then Ethan asked the question nobody wanted answered. If I stay, his voice trembled. She goes free? Eleanor immediately turned toward him. No. Tears filled her eyes. Ethan, don't. The giant answered first. Yes. The word echoed through the chamber. Simple. Certain. Terrifying. The harbor keeper closed his eyes. Pain crossed his face. Because now the choice had become real. Dangerously real. Eleanor stepped closer, grabbing Ethan's hands. Her fingers felt warm. Human. Real. Not a ghost. Not a dream. His sister. Ethan. Tears streamed down her cheeks. You don't owe me anything. The statement struck him deeply, because she genuinely believed it. After everything she had given up, she still expected nothing in return. Nothing. The selflessness broke his heart. Eleanor continued. I saved you because I wanted you to live. Her voice shook. Not because I wanted this. The chamber listened. The water listened. Even the giant seemed to listen. I don't regret it. The words emerged softly. Honestly. Completely. Completely. Silence followed. The truth of her statement felt undeniable. Eleanor smiled through tears. A beautiful smile. A heartbreaking smile. The smile of someone who loved deeply. I got to watch you grow up. The words surprised him. She continued quietly. I saw your first baseball game. Ethan blinked. What? I saw your graduation. Another pause. I saw you fall in love. His chest tightened. Eleanor laughed softly through tears. I even saw that terrible mustache face. For the first time all night, Ethan laughed. A broken laugh. A tearful laugh. But a real one. The harbor keeper smiled faintly too.
because suddenly, the mystery felt human again. Not supernatural, not impossible. Human. Family. Love. Eleanor squeezed his hands. I was there. The statement carried enormous tenderness.
You just couldn't see me. The realization shattered him completely. Every important moment, every milestone, every victory, every heartbreak. His sister had been watching, protecting, caring, from somewhere beyond sight. Never interfering, never asking for recognition, simply loving him, the way family does, the way family always does. The memory sea suddenly brightened. The giant shifted. The chamber trembled. Time was running out. Everyone felt it. The crossing was nearing its conclusion. The decision approached. The moment approached. The giant spoke again. The balance must be restored. The lighthouse groaned overhead. Stone cracked somewhere deep within the cavern. The ancient structure seemed strained, as though reality itself had begun pulling apart. Eleanor turned toward the giant, then surprised everyone, including Ethan. No. The word echoed powerfully. The giant became still. The water became still. Everything became still. Eleanor stepped toward the glowing pool, toward the crossing, toward her fate. And for the first time, she looked fearless, truly fearless. The sadness remained, the love remained, the loneliness remained, but fear had vanished because she had finally made peace with her story. The realization was beautiful and devastating. I choose. The words emerged softly, yet somehow they filled the entire cavern. The giant remained silent, listening. Eleanor looked at Ethan, then smiled. A real smile, the kind siblings share, the kind family shares, the kind that survives every distance, every loss, every goodbye. Then she spoke words he would remember forever. You were never the debt. Silence. The chamber glowed softly. The water shimmered. Eleanor continued. You were the gift. Tears filled Ethan's eyes again, because suddenly he understood. She never saw her sacrifice as a burden. She saw his life as something worth protecting, something worth saving, something worth everything. The realization felt overwhelming, healing, heartbreaking, beautiful. Then, a voice echoed across the cavern. Another voice. Not the giant, not Eleanor, not the harbor keeper. A familiar voice. A voice Ethan had heard before. A voice impossible to forget. His father's. Eleanor. Everyone turned instantly. The silver water erupted with light. A new figure appeared beside the pool. Then another. Then another. The chamber filled with glowing silhouettes. People. Dozens of them. Perhaps hundreds. The lost sailor. Abigail. Former lighthouse keepers. Missing travelers. Faces from photographs. Faces from stories. Faces from forgotten histories. And standing among them, William Harper, smiling, watching, waiting. He looked toward Eleanor, then extended his hand. The harbor keeper gasped. Ethan couldn't move, because the impossible truth became suddenly clear. The crossing wasn't opening, it was gathering, and whatever came next would change everything. The chamber filled with light, not harsh light, not blinding light, something softer, something deeper. Like dawn remembering itself beneath the earth. Figures stood all around the memory sea now. Dozens, then hundreds, then more than Ethan could count. They did not appear suddenly. They unfolded, slowly, like memories returning after years of silence. Faces emerged from the silver mist. The lost sailor from the storm. Abigail, the pianist. The harbor keeper's grandmother. Lighthouse keepers from forgotten decades. Children who had vanished near the shore. Travelers who followed the fog and never returned. And among them, William Harper, Ethan's father, still the same, still smiling, still watching. The chamber felt impossibly full, not crowded, alive, as though the underground world had finally exhaled after holding its breath for centuries. Ethan stood frozen beside the glowing water. Eleanor remained at his side, her hand still holding his, tight, warm, real. The giant presence above the memory sea loomed quietly now. No longer speaking,
no longer judging, simply observing, waiting for the final threat to settle. The gathering continued. More figures arrived, each stepping forward from the silver mist as if crossing an invisible boundary, each one carrying a story that had never truly ended. The harbor keeper whispered shakily, "They all came back." His voice broke slightly. "All of them." Ethan looked at the sea of faces, and something deep inside him shifted, because none of them looked lost. Not anymore. They looked aware, peaceful, as though the years between disappearance and return had not been emptiness, but somewhere else entirely. William stepped closer. His presence felt stronger now, more defined, like the memory sea was giving him shape again. He looked at Ethan, then at Eleanor, then smiled softly. A father's smile, gentle, reassuring, proud. "Ethan." The voice carried through the chamber like a familiar song. Ethan's throat tightened instantly. He couldn't respond. Words failed him. William nodded slightly. "I told you."
There wasn't much time. A pause. But I didn't say for whom. The words lingered. Strange. Unfinished. Ethan frowned slightly. What does that mean? William did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked around at the gathered souls, at the countless lives that had passed through the crossing, at the stories suspended between worlds. Then he spoke. The crossing was never a place. His voice was calm, measured, certain. It was a pause. Silence spread through the chamber. Even the memory sea stilled. William continued. A moment between endings. A pause. And continuations. Eleanor listened closely. Her expression changed subtly, as though she already understood. William stepped closer to the edge of the glowing water. The debt was never about taking. He glanced at Eleanor. It was about holding. The giant presence above the sea shifted slightly, as though acknowledging the truth. William looked back at Ethan. You weren't meant to die that day. His voice softened. But you did. And you didn't. The contradiction hung in the air. Impossible, yet familiar. Ethan shook his head slightly. I don't understand. William smiled faintly. I know. He looked down at the memory sea, at the swirling silver light, at the reflection of countless lives. That's why the crossing kept you. Eleanor's grip on Ethan tightened slightly, not in fear, in warning. William continued. You were not saved once. You were saved repeatedly. The chamber grew still, completely still. The crossing didn't fix your death, William said quietly. It fractured it. Ethan's breath caught. What does that mean? The answer came slowly, carefully, like a truth too large for language. It created all the versions of what could have happened next. The words sank deep, into silence, into understanding, into fear. William gestured gently toward the gathered figures. Every person here is part of that fracture. He looked at Abigail, at the sailor, at the keeper's grandmother, at Eleanor. And so are you. Ethan felt his mind struggle, trying to hold on to logic, trying to hold on to normal reality, but it kept slipping away. William's voice softened. You didn't just survive, Ethan. A pause. You multiplied. The chamber trembled slightly. The memory sea rippled. The giant presence shifted again, as if something fundamental had been acknowledged. William continued. And each version carries something unfinished. Ethan's voice cracked. So what happens now? Silence. Then William answered. Now, they return. A wave of silver light surged through the chamber. The gathered souls began to glow brighter, not fading, not disappearing, integrating. The harbor keeper stepped back. Return where? William looked at him. To the moment they were lost. The words struck like lightning. Ethan stepped forward. No. The word came out instinctively. William met his gaze. Not as they were,
A pause, as they needed to be. Eleanor closed her eyes, as though she had already accepted this long ago. The giant presence spoke again, its voice deeper now, calmer. The crossing is closing. The chamber trembled harder. Cracks formed along the stone ceiling. Light poured in from above, from the lighthouse, from reality itself. William turned toward Ethan one last time, and this time, his smile was softer, more final. Ethan, I'm proud of you. The words shattered something inside him, not painfully, fully, completely, like a dam breaking after years of pressure. Tears streamed down his face. He couldn't stop them, didn't try to. William stepped back toward the glowing sea, then stopped. And Ethan, he hesitated. Don't stay in the moment that broke you. The meaning hit deeply. The crossing was not only about loss, it was about refusing to remain inside it. William began to dissolve, slowly, like light returning to water. The gathered souls followed, one by one. Abigail, the sailor, the lost children, the keeper's grandmother, all of them fading gently into the memory sea. Not disappearing, returning. The chamber shook violently now. The giant presence began to collapse into light. Eleanor turned to Ethan urgently. It's closing. The water surged upward. The lighthouse above groaned like it might split apart. William's final form remained just long enough to speak once more. One last sentence. Soft, clear, unbreakable. Choose what comes next. Then he was gone. The chamber exploded into silver brilliance. The memory sea erupted. The crossing collapsed. And Ethan was pulled toward the surface of reality, with Eleanor's hand still holding his. Everything shattered into light. Not pain, not noise. Light. Ethan felt himself falling upward, downward, forward, backward.
All at once, the underground chamber dissolved behind him. The memory sea collapsed into silver fragments. The giant presence broke apart like mist in sunlight, and Eleanor's hand, still holding his, was the only thing keeping him anchored. Then even that began to fade. The sensation was not violent. It was quiet, like reality gently loosening its grip, like a memory deciding whether to remain or leave. Ethan tried to hold on tighter, but there was nothing physical to hold. Only sensation, only presence, only her, Eleanor. Her voice cut through the collapsing world. Don't fight it. The words were soft, close, as if she was right beside him, as if distance no longer mattered. Ethan struggled to respond. What is happening? But his voice didn't feel like sound. It felt like thought, fading, stretching, breaking into pieces. Eleanor's answer came calmly. The crossing is ending. A pause. But endings aren't what you think. The silver light intensified. Everything around them became motion without direction, time without sequence, memory without order. Ethan saw flashes, not visions, not dreams, fragments. His father smiling on a dock, a child laughing in rain, a lighthouse burning in stormlight, Eleanor standing alone in fog, a pocket watch frozen at 12:17, a woman playing piano in a window that no longer existed. All of it layered together, all of it happening at once. Then, silence. Absolute silence. Ethan realized something terrifying. He could no longer feel the ground, no longer feel the sea, no longer feel the chamber. Only Eleanor's hand, and even that was becoming distant. Eleanor, his voice cracked through nothingness. I'm losing you. Her reply was immediate. You're not losing me. A pause. You're remembering me differently. The words made no sense, and somehow made perfect sense. The light shifted, time bent, and suddenly Ethan saw her more clearly than ever before. Not as she was now, not as she had been in the memory sea, but as she truly existed. A girl, a teenager, standing at the edge of the ocean 30 years ago, wind in her hair, fear in her eyes, love in her heart, and a decision forming in her soul. Ethan saw it all. The moment she jumped, the moment she chose him, the moment everything fractured. Then, a voice returned. Not William, not the giant, not Eleanor. His own, but older, calmer, sadder. You always understood this. Ethan froze,
The voice came from everywhere, from inside him, from outside him, from the space between seconds. Then he saw it, another version of himself, standing in the silver light, watching, waiting, not shocked, not confused, accepted. The older Ethan stepped closer and spoke gently. You just didn't want to believe it. The realization began forming before words could complete it. The fracture, the multiplication, the branching of lives, not just history, not just memory, but identity. The crossing had never been one path. It had been all possible paths overlapping at once. And Ethan, the Ethan who stood now, was only one version. A version chosen, a version held, a version allowed to continue. The older Ethan extended a hand, not to pull, not to take, but to show. Look. The world shifted again, and Ethan saw everything, every version of himself. Countless lives branching from that single moment in childhood. One drowned, one survived, one grew up with Eleanor, one never met her, one lost his father early, one never had a father at all. Infinite Ethans scattered across impossible timelines, all real, all true, all existing in the crossing at once. Ethan staggered mentally. This isn't real. The older Ethan shook his head. It's all real. A pause, just not all at once. Eleanor's voice returned softly. This is why I saved you. Ethan turned. She was still there, fading, but present, her eyes filled with quiet understanding. Because you weren't supposed to become just one story. The silver light pulsed again. Everything trembled, reality folding inward. Ethan felt something inside him shift. The memory sea was collapsing fully now. The crossing was sealing itself. But before it closed, Eleanor stepped forward and placed her hand on his chest. Warm, real, final. You have to choose which version continues. Ethan froze. What? She smiled gently. The crossing doesn't decide anymore. A pause. You do. The weight of it hit instantly. Every life, every possibility, every version of himself. Waiting, watching, asking. The chamber, no longer a chamber, became pure light, and Ethan stood at the center of infinite.
Calms, each one calling silently, each one real, each one incomplete. Eleanor's voice softened one last time. I chose mine when I saved you. Tears filled her eyes. Now you choose yours. The light intensified. Everything dissolved into a single moment, a single breath, a single decision. And Ethan understood. This was not about survival, not about death, not about the crossing. It was about identity. Who he would become when all impossible versions were finally allowed to collapse into one. The silence stretched, infinite, breathless, eternity held in suspension. And then, Ethan stepped forward, into the light.
Ethan stepped into the light, and the world stopped pretending to be many things at once. Everything collapsed into a single breath, a single heartbeat, a single moment that stretched wider than eternity. The infinite versions of him did not disappear. They softened, like reflections on water when the wind finally settles. He could still feel them, all of them. Every Ethan that could have been, every Ethan that almost was. Every version carrying a different ending, a different pain, a different love. But now they were no longer pulling him apart. They were waiting, watching, quiet. Eleanor stood just behind him, her hand still pressed lightly against his chest, as if anchoring him to the decision, to the moment, to himself. You feel them, don't you? She whispered. Ethan swallowed. Yes. His voice felt steadier now, more real, less fractured. Eleanor nodded gently. That's the crossing letting go. The silver light pulsed around them, not violently, not urgently, like a tide slowly choosing its direction. The older Ethan, still visible within the light, stepped back, not fading, not leaving, simply becoming part of the distance. His expression was calm, almost peaceful, because he already knew what Ethan was beginning to understand. There was no perfect life, only chosen ones. The harbor keeper's voice came faintly from somewhere beyond the light. Ethan, what do you see? Ethan closed his eyes and answered honestly. Everything I could have been. A pause.
and everything I still could be. Silence followed, the kind that feels sacred, not empty, not heavy, but meaningful, alive. Eleanor's fingers slowly loosened from his chest, not because she was letting go of him, but because she was letting him stand on his own, for the first time. "You don't have to save anyone now," she said softly. Ethan opened his eyes, and for the first time since the night began, he saw her clearly. Not as a mystery, not as a ghost between worlds, not as the girl trapped in sacrifice, but as his sister, human, present, real. "I don't understand," he whispered. Eleanor gave a faint, tired smile. "You already did." The light around them shifted again. The memory sea was no longer a sea, no longer a chamber, no longer a crossing. It was becoming something else, something simpler. A mirror. Ethan looked down and saw himself reflected in it. Only one version, not infinite, not fractured, just one. But behind that reflection, he could still feel the others, like echoes, like possibilities, like stories that had been told but not erased. Eleanor stepped beside him. "Every choice leaves a trace," she said, "but only one becomes your life." Ethan looked at her. "And you?" The question came quietly, carefully. Eleanor's gaze softened. "I already made mine." A pause. "When I saved you." The words didn't hurt this time. They settled, like something finally understood instead of resisted. The silver light began to dim, slowly, like dawn retreating into memory. The infinite versions of Ethan faded further, not vanishing, receding, becoming background instead of presence. The harbor keeper's voice returned again, clearer now. "What happens when it closes?" Eleanor answered before Ethan could. "The crossing stops choosing for us." A pause, and starts remembering us instead. The light dimmed further. Shapes of the lighthouse reappeared. Stone, water, air, reality stitching itself back together. Ethan felt something strange, a grounding, not loss, not grief, but definition, like being placed gently into a shape that finally fit. Eleanor stepped closer one last time, her voice softened. "You're going back." Ethan's heart tightened. "And you?" A long pause. This time her answer carried no sadness, only acceptance. "I never left." The words settled deeply, not as tragedy, but as truth. The crossing had never released her, but it had kept her close enough to matter, close enough to save him, close enough to exist between moments he didn't notice. Ethan looked at her, really looked. "I remember now," he whispered. Eleanor smiled. "That's all I ever wanted." The silver light began collapsing inward. The mirror beneath them rippled. The lighthouse grew solid again. The underground world faded into structure, stone replacing impossibility, time reasserting itself. The last echoes of the infinite selves drifted away, leaving only one Ethan, one life, one choice already made. Eleanor stepped back, slowly, reluctantly, but without resistance, because she understood something Ethan was just beginning to learn. Some goodbyes are not endings, they are completions. The harbor keeper's voice came one final time. "What do we
Call this?" Ethan looked down at the fading light, at the collapsing crossing, at the life he was returning to, and answered simply, "Mine." The word anchored everything. The light surged one final time, not violently, not dramatically, like a breath being released after being held for too long. Eleanor's silhouette began to fade, not disappearing, becoming part of the world again, part of memory, part of life, part of something that would always exist without needing to be seen. Her final words reached him softly. "Live it fully." Then she was gone, and the light went out. Silence. Not the silence of the underground chamber, not the silence of the crossing. A different silence. Ordinary, heavy in its simplicity. Ethan opened his eyes. Cold air touched his face. Salt carried on a familiar wind. The sound of waves returned slowly, like memory restoring itself after a long absence. He was lying on wet stone. Not silver light, not infinite reflections. Stone. Real. Rough beneath his fingers. Above him, Blackwater Lighthouse stood intact. Solid. Unbroken. The beam turned steadily across the foggy sea. Everything looked normal. Too normal. Ethan slowly sat up. His body ached as if he had slept for years, or perhaps only seconds. Time refused to clarify. The harbor keeper was beside him, coughing softly as he pushed himself upright. Alive. Present. Real.
For a moment, neither spoke, because both were checking the same thing silently, whether the world had truly returned. Ethan's hand instinctively moved to his chest. Empty. No silver glow. No memory sea. No crossing. Only heartbeat. Slow. Steady. Human. He exhaled sharply. It's gone. The harbor keeper looked toward the lighthouse. Or closed. His voice was uncertain. Careful. As though speaking too confidently might reopen something that should stay sealed. The fog rolled gently over the rocks. Soft. Harmless. Ordinary. But neither man trusted ordinary anymore. Ethan stood slowly. His legs felt weak. Not injured. Just adjusted. As if reality itself had changed its grip on him and was still settling back into place. The harbor stretched quietly behind them. No glowing village. No impossible crowd. No distant figures watching from another world. Only darkness. Water. Stone. Ethan looked out toward the sea, trying to find something. Anything. A trace. A sign. A reflection of what had happened. But the ocean gave nothing. Only waves. Only wind. Only silence. The harbor keeper finally spoke. We came back. Ethan nodded slowly. Yes. A pause. But not everything came back with us. The old man didn't answer immediately, because they both understood. Some things don't return. They remain where they chose to remain, or where they chose to belong. Ethan looked down at his hand. There was no pocket watch, no glowing artifact, no proof of what had happened. Yet he remembered everything, too clearly, too deeply, as if the experience had been etched into something more permanent than memory. The keeper wiped his face with his sleeve. You saw it too, didn't you? Ethan nodded again. The crossing, and everything inside it. The old man exhaled slowly. I spent my life trying to prove it existed. He shook his head. I never thought I'd survive it. Ethan gave a faint, tired smile. Maybe we didn't. The keeper looked at him sharply. Ethan continued quietly. Maybe we just became the version that remembers it. That thought settled between them. Neither confirmed it. Neither denied it. Because both felt its truth in different ways. The lighthouse beam passed overhead again. Normal. Predictable. Reassuring in a strange way. Ethan turned toward it. Something pulled at him. Not forcefully. Not urgently. Just awareness. He stared at the base of the lighthouse. At the rocks where the iron door had been. There was nothing there now. No seam. No crack. No hidden passage. Only stone. But beneath that stone, he still felt it. Not the crossing. Not the memory sea. Something quieter. Like an echo that refuses to disappear entirely. The keeper followed his gaze. It's sealed. Ethan nodded. Or waiting. The words felt both comforting and unsettling at the same time. They stood there for a long time, letting the world reassemble itself around them. Bit by bit. Sound returning. Distance returning. Normal life returning. But neither man was fully inside it yet. Because once you've seen a place between lives, even reality feels like a version of something else. Finally, the keeper spoke again. What do we do now? Ethan looked at the lighthouse. At
Calm, the beam circling endlessly, at the horizon where fog met sea. And for a long moment, he didn't answer, because the question wasn't simple anymore. It never would be again. But eventually, he did. We remember. A pause. And we live forward. The harbor keeper nodded slowly, as if accepting something both painful and necessary. The wind moved across the rocks. Gentle. Cold. Real. Ethan took one last look at the lighthouse, and something inside him softened. Not grief. Not loss. Something quieter. Understanding. Because he knew now, Eleanor wasn't gone in the way he once understood that word. She was somewhere the crossing had placed her. Not between worlds anymore, but inside the fabric of memory itself, where she had always been, in a way. He closed his eyes briefly. I remember you, he whispered. Not to the sea, not to the lighthouse, but to her. And for a moment, very briefly, he thought he felt something answer. Not a voice, not a vision, just warmth. Then it passed. The moment dissolved into wind and water. Reality reasserted itself fully. The keeper started walking back toward the shore. Ethan followed, step by step,
away from the rocks, away from the lighthouse, away from everything that could not come with them. The fog thickened behind them again, slowly, naturally, as if nothing extraordinary had ever disturbed it. But before it fully closed the view, Ethan looked back one last time, and for a fraction of a second, just a fraction, he saw a faint silver reflection on the water, like someone waving goodbye. Then it was gone, and only the ocean remained. The walk back to the harbor felt longer than the journey into the lighthouse, not because the distance had changed, but because Ethan had. Every step echoed differently now. Every sound felt slightly delayed, as if reality was still catching up to him. The harbor keeper walked ahead in silence. His shoulders were slightly hunched, not from age, from weight. The kind of weight that comes from knowing too much and too little at the same time. Behind them, Blackwater Lighthouse stood unchanged, a silent guardian. A structure that had just contained an entire impossible world, and now pretended it had always been nothing more than stone and light. The fog slowly reclaimed the shoreline, gentle, patient, as though nothing unusual had ever disturbed it. Ethan kept glancing back, half expecting, half hoping, but there was nothing. No silver glow, no impossible figures, no Eleanor. Only the lighthouse beam sweeping across empty water. Still, predictable, real. By the time they reached the dock, the sky had shifted slightly. Night deepened, stars faintly visible through the mist. The boat they had arrived in rocked softly against the wood. Ordinary again. The harbor keeper stepped aboard first. Ethan followed without speaking. Neither of them turned on the engine immediately. For a long moment, they just sat there, listening. To water, to wind, to the absence of everything that had been. Finally, Ethan spoke. "Do you think it was real?" The question was simple, but it carried everything. The keeper didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at his hands. Rough, shaking slightly. Then he said quietly, "I don't know what else it could have been." That answer was enough. Not certainty, but honesty. The boat engine started with a low rumble. They pulled away from the lighthouse slowly, the shoreline shrinking behind them, the tower growing smaller, returning to what it had always been. A distant structure in the sea, a place people pointed at, a place people feared, a place people never truly understood. Ethan watched it until it became just a line of light. Then nothing. Only fog. Only ocean. Only night. After a long silence, the keeper spoke again. "Do you remember everything?" Ethan nodded. "Yes." A pause. Too much. The old man gave a quiet, tired sound that might have been a laugh. Memory is heavier than stone sometimes. That line stayed with Ethan. He turned his gaze to the water. And for a moment, he thought about Eleanor again. Not as a mystery, not as a sacrifice, but as someone who had lived an entire life between moments. Someone who had watched him grow from somewhere he could never see. Someone who had always been there, just not in the way he understood presence. A faint ache formed in his chest. Not sharp, not breaking, just present, like something gently resting where it always would. The boat moved.
Calm, steadily through the fog. The harbor lights of the village slowly reappeared ahead. Familiar shapes returning, familiar sounds returning. The world reassembling itself around them. But Ethan knew something had permanently shifted. He would never see it the same way again. Not the sea, not the lighthouse, not even silence. Because now he knew silence could contain entire worlds. The harbor keeper broke the quiet one last time. "What will you do now?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. He watched the shoreline grow closer, watched the familiar docks reappear, watched life resume its shape. Then he said softly, "Live." A pause. "And remember only what I need to." The keeper nodded.
as if that was the only answer that ever made sense. The boat touched the dock. They stepped off without ceremony. No triumph, no collapse, no grand ending, just arrival. The harbor returned to its ordinary rhythm around them. Distant lights, slow waves, night wind. Ethan stood for a moment at the edge of the dock, looking out, trying to find something that no longer existed in the same way, and yet, somehow, still felt close. He closed his eyes. Eleanor's voice came back to him faintly, not spoken, not heard, remembered. Live it fully. A breath passed, then another. Ethan opened his eyes. The fog was thick now, the lighthouse completely hidden, the sea indistinguishable from sky, and somewhere within that blur of distance and memory, he knew she was still there, not waiting, not trapped, but existing in the only place she had ever truly belonged now, inside the space between what was and what remains. Ethan turned away from the water and walked forward, into life. The town looked the same. That was the first thing Ethan noticed. The streets, the harbor lights, the distant sound of waves against wood and stone. Everything continued exactly as it always had, as if nothing had ever fractured beneath the lighthouse, as if no other world had ever pressed against this one. But Ethan knew better now. The world hadn't changed. He had. He walked alone along the dock road. The harbor keeper had gone his separate way without ceremony. No farewell speeches. No final explanations. Just a quiet nod between two people who had seen too much to ever return to before. Night had fully settled now. Soft, calm, familiar. But even calm things felt different after the crossing, because Ethan could still feel it. Not the place, not the light, something deeper. A presence in memory itself, like a second heartbeat behind his own. He stopped near the edge of the harbor. The water stretched out in front of him. Endless, dark, normal. Yet beneath that normal surface, he now understood something that would never leave him. Reality was never just one layer. It was many, stacked quietly on top of each other. And most people never noticed the seams. Ethan exhaled slowly. His hands rested in his pockets. Empty. No pocket watch. No silver light. No proof. Only memory. Only experience. Only him. A soft wind passed over the harbor, and for a moment he closed his eyes. Not to escape, but to listen. Because now he knew how to listen differently. Not for voices. Not for signs. But for meaning inside silence. And there, very faintly, he felt her. Not a vision. Not a sound. Just warmth. Like sunlight remembered through fog. Eleanor. Not gone. Not trapped. Not waiting. Just existing in the only way she could now. Inside what mattered. Inside what was remembered. Ethan opened his eyes. The harbor stretched before him, peaceful and still. For the first time since childhood, the past no longer felt like a wound. It felt like a story that had finally found its shape. A story that hurt. A story that had saved. A story that had changed everything without asking permission. And somewhere in that understanding, there was peace. Not perfect peace. Not clean peace. But human peace. The kind that comes after surviving something you were never meant to fully understand. Ethan looked up at the night sky. Stars scattered across it like distant memories refusing to disappear. He thought about his father. About Abigail. About the lost sailor.
about all the lives that had passed through the crossing and returned somewhere else entirely. Not erased, not ended, just transformed. Then he whispered softly into the night, "Thank you." He didn't know exactly who he meant it for. Maybe all of them. Maybe none. Maybe
just the part of himself that had made it through. A long silence followed. The sea answered only with waves. But Ethan didn't need more than that. He turned away from the water and began walking home. Each step was quieter than the last. Each breath more grounded. Each moment more his own. Behind him, the harbor faded into fog. Ahead of him, the town lights waited, warm, ordinary, alive. And as he walked, something gentle settled inside him. Not an ending, not a loss, but integration. The past no longer pulled at him. It lived with him, as memory, as meaning, as something that would always be there, but no longer control the shape of his life. For the first time, Ethan was not between worlds. He was in one, fully, finally. And as he disappeared down the quiet street, the night seemed to soften around him, like the world itself was exhaling. Somewhere far beyond the harbor, beyond the lighthouse, beyond even memory, a faint silver shimmer flickered once across the water. Not calling, not waiting, just remembering. Then it faded, and the sea remained. Still, endless, peaceful. The story of the crossing did not end. It simply became part of everything that came after, and Ethan Harper finally lived forward.